The story begins in a magical world called Arpedia. However, it is technically an unreal place because you can only get there via the internet. Arpedia Online is considered the greatest fantasy game among modern virtual reality games. This game uses a special game capsule to affect the five senses in such a way that it may not even be distinguishable from reality. The user is placed in this futuristic capsule, and then his consciousness is transported to the fantasy world. Thanks to the patented scanning technology he uses to create an avatar identical to the user, this stunning game is also enhanced with the latest artificial intelligence technology, which allows non-player characters and monsters to act as if they actually have a mind. It also offers a dynamic and fun experience without the need for nagging, which adds to the reasons why it's considered the greatest Korean game of all time. The game became so popular that people started paying close attention to the current players of the game. But even among the best, there is always one person who stands out from the crowd, and the most prominent of them is none other than the 50th ranked warrior, Bots. But why do people pay so much attention to him? Even if he isn't the highest ranked player in the game, that's because Bots is very different from the rest. In Arpedia Online, it's considered essential for survival to band together. But Bars remains the only hardcore lone player who managed to tackle a fierce dragon single-handedly. As you might expect, rumors have started to spread about Boltz's real-world identity. Some say he has a close relationship with the game's developers, while other people think he's a rich kid who donated to the game. But to tell you the truth, our guy is nothing like them in the real world. Boltz is just an unemployed man named Kang Yo-han. He spends most of his time in his room thinking about what the people in the game are saying about him. He doesn't understand why they're all so excited just because he defeated a fierce dragon. Fierce dragons aren't that important to him, and he even went to visit his grandmother after this feat. In another scene, we see Kangyo returning to the game standing naked in the middle of the street, and of course this attracts the attention of everyone around him. But the guy doesn't seem to realize what's going on, as if it wasn't already not awkward enough. And one of them points at Kangyo, laughing and urging the others to look at him. But another player refuses to look, stating that Kangyo has clearly lost his mind. But then a little time passes and everyone around them starts whispering about the situation. Some of them even suggest reporting Kangyo and start calling the game masters responsible for moderating the game. Kangyo sees that he's about to get into big trouble. He nervously asks them to wait, claiming that he's going to immediately equip his clothes. The guy tells them not to report him, and immediately opens his inventory. But unfortunately, when Kangyo checks it, he's shocked to find that it was empty, and judging by the frantic expression on his face, you could tell he was horrified when he saw that all his belongings were gone. A confused Kangyo wonders if this could be a mistake, and starts looking for the report error button. But of course that button is nowhere to be found either, and then the reality of the situation finally hits him when he sees that his profile has been changed. Kangyo was no longer a rank 50 single warrior, but merely a level 1 rookie. He screams so loudly that it gets his mother's attention in the real world. An agitated woman bursts into his room thinking he's been attacked by a thief or something. However, she found Kangyo sweating and breathing heavily in front of her capsule. And he doesn't say anything at all. Kangyo reveals the problem to her, saying that he thinks his account has been hacked. He doesn't understand what to do. The mother freezes when she hears this, and then asks if he's the one about the game account. The boy nods in response, tears streaming down his face. Hearing this, his mother goes into a state of absolute rage. And we see her head turn into a tiger's head. I mean, she's about to tear his sorry ass apart. I mean, he's making a fuss over something so stupid. After Kangyo dropped out of college, he said he'd figure out his own life. After that, Kangyo's mother was speechless, so she just ran out of his room, telling him that she was about to have a seizure. The guy curls up next to his pod, and in utter despair begins to cry. World's best player, lone warrior, dragon slayer. All these titles disappeared into thin air in an instant. Kangyo later called Dream Max Corporation, the game's developers, to explain the situation with his account. And like a real man, he started complaining that his character may have been hacked. He explains that he had already sent the application in, but received a reply saying that everything was fine. However, Kangyo is sure that this is impossible because all of his game data has been erased. Our guy was told that his character was created just 4 days ago and there is nothing unusual about his account. Kangyo tries to explain that he created Boltz a long time ago, during open beta testing. Why did his equipment disappear? Suddenly, the agent informs him that the bot's character he's referring to was deleted 5 days ago. When the guy hears that, he's horrified, because he doesn't remember doing anything like that. Kangyo tries to explain that he couldn't log in all last week because he was at his grandmother's house. He insists in every possible way that his account was hacked because he couldn't delete his favorite character. But the agent tries to convince him that they are not being watched and assures him that Dream Max has a world-class security system installed. And the agent further asserts that the problems Kangyo is experiencing are most likely the result of his own mishandling of personal information. He adds that the company recommends that passwords be changed weekly, just to prevent this from happening. He did not change his passwords as recommended, and as a result, the company cannot take responsibility for his misuse of personal information. And before the agent can finish talking, Kangyo angrily interrupts him, shouting that he understands, but yet our guy still believes his account was hacked because he knows for a fact that he would never delete his account. Grief-stricken and enraged, he swears that he will never forgive the perpetrator. The guy doesn't know his name yet, but is determined to take revenge on the unknown hacker. Later that night, Brother Hyung stops by to hold a memorial service for bots, but the brother originally came because their mom wanted to see Kangyo, but after seeing his brother grieving, Hyun just stands there confused. Kangyo strangely offers Hyun a drink. The brother begins to wonder if his older brother has lost his mind. Hyun can't drink at all since he's underage, but Kangyo seems to have forgotten that too. And then Hyun asked his brother if he'd gone completely crazy studying for the civil servant exam. Kangyo never really believed that his brother could pass the exam. He confesses that his soulmate has left this world and there is no way he can stay sober. Even though Hyun is incredibly frustrated, he manages to portray some sympathy for his older brother as he drowns his sorrows in alcohol. And at the same time, when Kangyo plans to drink himself to death, Hyun just thinks about what a loser the guy is. Like playing all day long, that's not pity. Hyun tells his older brother that their mom asks him to go get the ladle from the first floor. Kangyo replies that he's busy and asks him to go get it himself, but the younger brother points out that unlike some people, he actually needs to go to school and wants to learn there. The kid is a high school student, not an unemployed adult like his sorry ass. Upon hearing this, Kangyo can't help but feel acutely hurt by his younger brother's lack of respect for him. He even thinks that Hyun may think he is above him despite being the older brother. After Hyun leaves for school, Kangyo comes down to where their family business is located. He tells his father that his mom wants a ladle, but the old man is perplexed as to why. The boy suddenly remembered that his mom had broken the ladle while making fried rice. Hearing this, the man wondered just how much force it took to stir with to ruin the ladle. Taking the new ladle in his hands, Kangyo told his father that he didn't know anything, and that his mother didn't realize that all objects have innate strength. Suddenly a terrific idea comes into his head. Thinking about the durability of the ladle, the guy starts laughing like a real maniac. Although his father has no idea what is going on in his son's head, he rushes up the stairs like a madman, while his father yells at him to shut the door before he leaves. Kangyo realizes that Arpedia Online has a durability system. Each piece of equipment loses its durability as it is used, and when it reaches 0, the item is always destroyed. Because of this, players are always looking for blacksmiths who can repair their weapons in advance. The repairability of gear varies by level, meaning that the better and more expensive the gear, the higher the level of blacksmith he should entrust it to. And what do you think would happen if a high-level blacksmith was repairing equipment on the cheap? The answer is that everyone would clearly rush to this blacksmith to ask for repairs. Kangyo remembers that all of Bots's equipment was expensive and rare, so he knows there's no way the hacker would leave him alone. He thinks the hacker sold all his stuff before deleting the guy's character, so he plans to find that person by following their trail. In planning this plan, Kangyo is more confident than ever that it's only a matter of time before he catches the hacker. The scene changes and Kangyo re-enters. At the entrance to Arpedia Online, an angel with a yellow balloon asks our Kangyo if he wants to log in. But this time he has something else in mind instead. He wants to create a new character. The gatekeeper asks Kangyo to pick his character's birthday, and he just suggests he pick a random number, and the gatekeeper picks April 4th. And then also asks if Kangyo wants his name randomly selected, and of course our Kangyo prefers to do it himself. He's thinking of a name because he needs something short and strong like a leopard. And suddenly a name comes to his mind, and with excitement he snaps his fingers choosing Zeke as the name for his new character. The gatekeeper receives the information and processes it, and then the gates begin to open for Kang Yu. And when the character Zeke is created, our Kang Yu is sure it will be the name of the greatest blacksmith in all of Arpedia. But unfortunately, there are a few obstacles along the way because just as Zeke is about to start his new career, the older blacksmith tells him that he doesn't stand a chance. It's a job that requires endless patience and endurance, and he calls wildly and tenaciously that it's not a job Zeke can take on at will. And based on this absurd reasoning, a blacksmith named Smith tells Zeke to get out of his workshop immediately. In this game, there are 2 ways to get a crafting job in Arpedia. The first way is to learn by buying a tutorial, and the second learn by working. The second method would allow you to earn money by advancing. But everyone in Arpedia seems to avoid it, and the reason for that is because every master craftsman has a strange personality. Zeke is especially wary of Smith, because even when he was a barbarian he always tried to pick a fight with him when he wanted to fix his equipment. However, now that he was Zeke and also broke, he decided that the best thing he could do as a level 10 character with 35 gold in his account was to complete the promotion task. Zeke thinks it shouldn't be that hard, and that's why he first knocked on Pabuchi's door. Zeke walks into a blacksmith shop and tells a dude he wants to be a blacksmith, but Zeke wants to be not just anyone, but the greatest blacksmith in the world. And Pabuchi finds it funny because just by looking at Zeke, he realizes he's not cut out for the job. But Kangyo naturally protests, claiming that Pabuchi must be fair enough to at least test him before letting him down. And upon hearing this, the blacksmith is completely confused, because Kangyo explains that he can order him to do anything to see what the guy can do. And after some thought, Pabuchi agrees to the deal. Kangyo looks at the tall pile of logs stacked on top of each other, and Pabuchi suddenly orders him to chop all that wood, saying he only has 1 day to do it. Smith tells Zeke that he will reconsider his previous decision if Kangyo succeeds. Pabuchi turns around and walks away while Kangyo is still in shock because he expects him to chop a lot of wood. To be clear, Kangyo asks the blacksmith what really needs to be chopped all that wood, and Pabuchi tells him to quit if he doesn't have the guts, and realizing that it's the only way to prove his willingness, and Kangyo gets to work. But unfortunately, Kangyo is not a good wood chopper, and that's putting it mildly. Kangyo swings his axe and misses the log he's supposed to split, and because he's breathing heavily, it's clear that he's been doing this for some time. At this point, you can see that even the log is disappointed in him because he didn't even get a scratch from Zeke's axe. But full of determination to succeed, Zeke repeats his attempts many times, but each time misses to the point where the log begins to mock him, and so the hero becomes extremely desperate and begins to scream, wondering why he even asked for the job. Kangyo remembers seeing other characters immediately advance and being taught how to use a hammer, but then why is he using an axe instead of a hammer and trying to split one single piece of wood? One of the lumberjacks intervenes and suggests that he's probably in trouble because of his parentage. Zeke was curious to hear from the logger, so he asked the guy who he was. And at this point the guy confesses that he's also a dwindling hopeful apprentice blacksmith, and he explains that the birthday he chose for his character during his creation also determines your affinity for the profession. And crafting quests are notoriously difficult at first if the affinity doesn't match. Zeke is both relieved and annoyed by what he hears, because he realizes that it's as if he's partially responsible for his problem. But he had no idea that birthdays were so important in the game, and he's already regretting his earlier decision to let the gatekeeper choose for him. The blacksmith's apprentice tells us that because of this he is facing the same problem as him. Zeke didn't seem to care about him anymore and was more concerned with what he could do to fix this situation. He's pissed because he didn't know about it before and considers creating a new character, but if he does he'll have to reach level 10 again, and instead of worrying, Zeke decides to just focus on the current task at hand, which is to chop a huge pile of firewood. So Zeke picks up his axe again and starts swinging it, and with a new sense of motivation Zeke yells for the log to die, but then still misses again. This time, however, Zeke doesn't give up and instead channels all his frustration into chopping wood until he succeeds. Pabuchi arrives a while later and sees Zeke lying on the ground as if dead and is surprised to see that he actually completed a task during the day. Zeke gets up and reminds the blacksmith that he said he'd do it, so now he expects to be officially hired at the forge. But unfortunately, the evil bald man tells Zeke that he still can't hire him. The blacksmith then gives him a sword and orders him to mine 10 black coals at a place called the Runkle Mine. Zeke practically deflates when he hears this because he knows that the Runkle Mines is a dangerous place where only those above level 15 should dare to enter, and there was a field boss of the mines, a 45 level fierce boar. So our hero is very reluctant to accept the order. He asks Pabuchi if he'll take responsibility for his death, pointing out that he's barely made it to level 10, and in response the blacksmith shows rare kindness in letting our hero borrow one of his swords, but he still thinks Zeke is too whiny, so he tells Zeke he can quit if he doesn't like the mission. But Zeke thinks his proximity shouldn't be so insignificant as to deter him, so in the end he agrees to the task and takes the sword. However, before he sets off, Zeke asks Pabucci if he promises to hire him when he completes this mission, and with a suspicious smirk on his face Pabucci agrees to let him become a blacksmith if Zeke succeeds. After a verbal agreement, Zeke heads to the mines, where his goal is to get 10 grand of black coal from a place marked by this asshole. Zeke seems to have made a habit of missing because even in the mines he keeps dodging his targets. Seeing that his approach isn't working, he calms down and decides to use the same scheme he used in his wood-chopping trial. Clutching the pickaxe lightly and swinging it in a circle, he strikes the rocks like a sword and finally gets his first black coal. Zeke praises himself, believing he just demonstrated his 2 years of experience, and with this new strategy he swings the pick like a sword again, and it works for the second time in a row. And now that he's acquired 10 units of black coal, all he has to do is deliver them to Pabucci, and then Zeke will finally receive his reward of a promotion to blacksmith. But unfortunately, the road leading back to Pabucci is littered with several dangerous monsters, and even though most of them are occupied by other players, a 45th level rabid boar is targeting only Zeke, and just when Zeke thinks he's one step closer to catching the hacker, but he gets a warning message informing him of the arrival of a field boss, and it seems Zeke has forgotten about the raging boar, because he doesn't really look like he's even remotely ready for a fight. Then the beast lunges at him and Zeke does the only sensible thing he can think of. Zeke runs in the opposite direction to where the other players are standing. Well, of course, when they see the raging boar running in their direction, they all run out of the way too. Zeke runs, saving his life. He wonders why a fierce boar appeared right in front of him, though it only appears once a day in a random place. Zeke knows that his health is terrible because he's only aiming for tinkering, and so if the boar gives him even one blow, Zeke will be dead. Then the terrible beast opens its wide mouth full of teeth and tries to bite Zeke, but he manages to dodge it by jumping over it. And when Zeke lands on the floor, he wonders if the boar's aggression is focused on him and fears that he will eventually have to stop running if that happens. And you know, in this game craft professions have a disadvantage in combat. However, Schick believes the nature of virtual reality gaming is that the character's body is connected to a real body, and since Arpedia Online is based on realism, this means that combat disadvantages are still possible depending on your combat abilities. With this in mind, Zeke gets motivated, so he rushes at the boar with his sword. Znick knows his weak spot is in the center of his forehead, so he just needs to strike accurately at that spot even if the attack is weak. But unfortunately, accuracy is not really his side, as we have seen, and what's worse, the boar blocks his attack and proceeds to wound him with a powerful headbutt. And by some miracle, Zeke is still alive, and then Zeke thinks the boar blocked his attack because he has low movement speed and regrets not bringing any agility potions with him. Then the furious boar lunges at him again, and Zeke just stands there confused because he doesn't know what else to do but try to hit him on his weak spot. And since that had already failed, Zeke thought of running away again. However, later he changes his mind, reminding himself that he is a legendary player who shouldn't be bothered by a simple entry-level monster. Zeke wields his sword and assumes his former identity, believing that while the character may be temporary, his class is still permanent. But unfortunately, just as he is about to go into God mode, he receives a message that his stamina was running low and is encouraged to eat something. But Zeke's knees go weak and he falls to the floor in shock that he no longer has stamina. But a raging boar is about to finish him off. But then someone fires a powerful arrow at the monster, and the arrow ends up hitting the boar and doing 30 damage, and makes him look like a harmless pig. And this boar was also shocked and screams when he sees that one of the enemies was broken. Out of nowhere comes some archer who fears she has done too little damage to the beast. The monster goes on another rampage and attacks the girl stealthily when she doesn't expect it. Looks like this girl wasn't prepared and she doesn't know what to do next. Then the boar jumps in the air and Zeke tells her to aim for the center of his forehead. And at the last moment, the girl manages to control her nerves and releases another arrow right into the creature's weak spot. After the explosion, a message appears confirming that the archer seer has defeated the fierce boar. Zeke sighs a sigh of relief knowing he barely survived. He thanks the archer for her help, but she interrupts him by grabbing his shoulder. Archer pulls the guy closer to her and asks, "Have they met before by any chance?" Our hero just stands there nervously while Saya studies his face curiously. She claims he looks very familiar but admits she could be wrong. Sia moves her face closer to Zeke, making him feel even more uncomfortable. Zeke starts to panic, wondering what is going on with this lady and why she is invading his personal space like this. Because he is so nervous, Zeke is too dumbfounded to even answer her. Sia gets his attention asking if he heard what she said. In response, Zeke starts to stutter nervously and then suddenly snaps out of his seat. Running away, the hero tries to explain that he has a mission to accomplish and therefore, he doesn't have time to talk to strangers even if they just saved his life. At least, we think that's what he said while running away. She cackles in surprise as he runs off, but still can't shake the feeling that she's met him somewhere before. Zeke returns with 10 pieces of black coal that the blacksmith sent him to retrieve. Zeke gives them to the evil blacksmith along with the sack. Holding the sack open and looking at the black coal, Zeke realizes that he has never actually seen minerals before, even though he has been playing Arpedia online for some time. Zeke has once again surpassed Pabuchi's expectations, and the bald man admits that he didn't think Zeke would successfully get the black coal and expresses his surprise. Upon hearing this, Zeke is very upset and asks Pabuchi why he's making him do something he didn't think he could do. Baldy just takes the embers from Zeke and eventually admits he was wrong about him. Pabuchi thinks he can make good use of Zeke's stamina, so he decides to hire him. Zeke is excited by this news and is also relieved, and suddenly an angel shaped like a balloon appears and asks if he would like to become a blacksmith. Of course our Zeke wants to, because that's the reason he's been suffering so much, and just at that moment a tab appears informing Zeke that he's officially a blacksmith, and of course he's thrilled that it's finally working out. Now his life as a blacksmith can begin so that one day he can become a legend himself. Zeke dreams of it, but his wishes are cut short when his new boss Pabuchi calls out to him, asking him to follow him. Zeke follows his master as he looks forward to the day he catches the hacker who ruined his gaming life. Back in the forge we see that Zeke has already started banging his hammer. Unfortunately, he doesn't have much luck at first. He was supposed to be working on a sword, but what we see is nothing like a sword at all. Even though the blade is curved, Zeke thinks he must be very talented, and in his opinion he has created something perfect. Zeke gleefully looks at the curved blade thinking it's great, but Pabuchi bursts his bubble claiming it's nonsense. Bosu doesn't like it and even doubts that the blade can cut a leaf. Baldy decides to ask the new apprentice for his mistake, but threatens not to pay him if he does something similar. Zeke tries to argue that the first work should at least have more value, but Pabuchi cuts him off and orders him to make short swords and warns him not to make them ugly. If Zeke does that, he'll get fired. He gets annoyed after the boss counts him out and wonders how different his swords might be from those of others. Zeke feels very unappreciated because he worked all day and night to create this first sword, and yet his asshole master doesn't care. Zeke curses his bald boss and vows to make the best short sword in the world. Zeke immediately sets to work and stays at it until darkness falls. By then he's almost done with the short sword, but still feels it's not enough. Zeke studies the weapons and wonders what he needs to do to make a good sword. He gets frustrated and worse, the game starts to mock him too. A tab appears where his sword is called a cheap piece of crap that only a beginner can make, and apparently the sword is of low quality and difficult to use due to the filthy condition. Seeing this, Zeke gets even more upset because he knows he can't gloat in front of Pabuchi if his work continues to progress in this way. Desperate to create a better sword, Zeke goes back to work, and after a while he notices something very strange. He sees that the last sword he created has many blue lines, which confuses him greatly. However, that's not the weirdest part, because it seems that the blue line is now on all the swords he made, but they all have a different style of overlay. Determined to get an answer, he immediately walks over to the other blacksmith's table and holds out his sword, and the guy demands Zeke to give it back, but the guy just ignores him. Zeke scrutinizes the man's sword and also sees the lines, but all the lines on this sword are curved, and the owner of the sword tries to take it back. But Zeke just points it in his face to show the weird lines, but unfortunately the guy doesn't see it. He's confused about what Zeke is saying and just backs away when he starts swinging the sword right in his face. Zeke tries to get him to see the lines, but the guy just tells him he can't see anything and warns him to stop shaking his sword like a child. For a moment, Zeke seems to think deeply about the mysterious lines, but ultimately decides to forget about them since he doesn't understand them. Zeke nonchalantly tosses the sword aside and suggests they just stick to the other assignments they were assigned to. He then gets his 5th assignment to train as a blacksmith. This time his task is to fix 5 broken axes and take them to Pabuchi because he's definitely a very good blacksmith. Zeke is supposed to know how to fix broken things, and when he sets out to find, Zeke is confused and scratching the back of his head again. Confused, he stares at the broken axe, and the axe also has those strange lines on it that he doesn't understand, and this time they are even red in color. After not coming up with a better idea, he decides to just try hitting it with the hammer. Hopefully this will fix the axe, and in turn the red lines will just disappear. Zeke starts banging his hammer, and after a while something terrible happens. He breaks the axe and a message appears informing him that he has failed to fix it. Zeke starts to complain that he has no talent for repair, and then he takes a closer look at the broken axe and sees that the red lines are still there. Zeke notices that the damaged shape matches the image of the red lines, and seeing this he suddenly begins to realize what the cause might be. Judging by the steam coming out of his ears, it's something overwhelming, and yet some time later Pabuchi returns to the blacksmith and he doesn't look too pleased. He yells at Zeke for failing to make short swords and points out that it's been days since he's been assigned this task. When Zeke doesn't answer, Pabuchi gets even more annoyed, so he walks over to him and the bald man asks Zeke how long it took him to make the 10 short swords and hopes he's also completed his training in repair. Pabuchi comes to Zeke and when he looks at the table he is too stunned to speak. Pabuchi is mesmerized by the shiny and beautiful short swords created by Zeke. And then Zeke asks Pabuchi what he thinks of them, but Enough still silently contemplates the swords, though he says nothing. Zeke already knows what Pabuchi thinks of them. He calls the swords perfect and tells me that he learned a shocking fact after a few days of production and repair. First, there were the blue lines. Zeke realized that they were the marks of a hammer striking metal, and their shape depended on the force and time of the hammering. The more evenly spaced the lines, the better the workmanship. The next thing he learned was what a red line was. He discovered that these red lines were cracked inside the metal fabric created during the repair process. So Zeke assumes that if he focuses on eliminating these red lines he can completely repair any item. In other words, all Zeke is trying to say is that he now knows that the blue and red lines that appear on items are cheat codes to improve production and repair. Zeke tells Pabuchi that he really didn't sleep for a few nights when he found out about it, but admits that it was all worth it because of those late nights. He gained a rare and incredible ability, and after telling all of this Pabuchi is silent for a moment, and then suddenly slams his palm on the table like a maniac, and of course Zeke is stunned, but also quickly realizes that there's simply no reason to worry. Zeke sees a genuine smile on Pabuchi's face for the first time when he tells him that he has passed the exam. The blacksmith tells Zeke that he has nothing more to teach him and assures him that he has done a good job, seeing the usually cruel boss smiling and giving him a thumbs up. Zeke is a bit skeptical. He is shocked and doesn't really believe him. Pabuchi assures him that he's talking seriously, indicating that his skills are already quite good. Pabuchi admits that Zeke really surprised him, but in his experience untalented guys like him usually give up right away. But our guy didn't, and now Zeke's practically an expert. And now Zeke asks Pabuchi if any other untalented guys have trained him, but Pabuchi shakes his head saying no, stating that no one could do it because they all didn't have the patience. Zeke then asks Pabuchi if any of these students said anything about seeing the lines. Pabuchi again says they didn't happen, especially since he himself has no idea what Zeke is talking about. Upon hearing this, Zeke stops asking questions and begins to wonder if his new ability is connected to some hidden accomplishment. Zeke thinks the likelihood of this is very high, and suggests that the conditions could have been that he had to have reached a certain rank by training with the NPSI while having the worst kinship. Zeke thinks about it for a bit and is sure that he has never seen anything like his case on the internet. Zeke also feels that he is the only one who has gone through all these difficulties in the game. As such, our hero feels that he is probably the only person in our entire online Arpedia possessing this ability. Remembering this, a smile appears on his face and he begins to realize that everything turned out much better than he expected. The next thing we see is a kind of flashback to when Kenya was still a teenager. It was the time he went to fix his stuff at Pabuchi's blacksmith shop, where Zeke asks him why he is so eager to be alone most of the time. Upon hearing this question, Boltz becomes confused and begins to recall some traumatic memories from his college days. The bully said all kinds of mean things to him. And in one scene we see them torturing him for telling the truth about something. They laugh, mock him and wish him dead, insult him. But our hero tries to put the hurtful words out of his head, but there are too many of them to ignore. They surround him and shower him with new insults. Finally we learn that the reason he prefers to be alone is to make his life unbearable. It's because he knows that people can't be trusted. Fortunately, the traumatic memories are cut short when Kanyo wakes up at the counter of his family's store. He's relieved to realize that it's just a bad dream and wonders if it has something to do with the fact that he didn't sleep last night. He rubs the back of his head tiredly because one thing that stresses him out is that his father makes him watch the store when there are no customers around. Anyway, he is distracted from his thoughts when the phone starts ringing. Looking at the screen, he sees an unfamiliar number. Kenyo doesn't understand why the unknown caller is trying to call him. But there's only one way to find out who it is: by answering the call. Kenyo picks up the phone and says hello, then waits for a response from the person on the other end of the line. The person finally introduces himself and says he is Young Who Sick, who happens to be Dream Max's customer service manager. And Kenyo has a grudge against the organization for abandoning him, and now he's in crisis, so they're the last people he wants to talk to. Kenyo tries to quickly end the conversation with his manager. However, Yang Hu manages to stop him from doing so. He asks Kenyo to wait and reminds him that he contacted them a few days ago saying that his account had been hacked. Hearing this, Kenyo suddenly concludes that they have decided to recreate his favorite character. But unfortunately that's not the case. Yang Ho informs him that according to their company policy, they can't restore bars. Kongyo's energetic behavior suddenly changes. Fortunately, there is good news because the company decided to give Kenyo a small compensation for his unexpected loss. Hearing this, Kenyo finds it a little annoying that they call it compensation when bars is his character. In his opinion, they shouldn't see it as a gift because it's the character that was taken away from him. Kenyo refuses the gift and tells them not to bother calling him if they don't restore bars. Just as he's about to hang up again, Yang Ho tells him the compensation he's prepared for him is the newest model of capsule that costs $8 million. Then he asks Kenyo whether he needs the capsule or not. As one might expect for an obsessive online RPD player, this offer seems tempting, and when Kenyo heard this, he was speechless and drooling at the offer. And like a crazed junkie suffering from Down syndrome, he screams that he needs this capsule. On a tropical island, someone asks the customer service manager if Kenyo liked the continuation of the capsule. The manager sucks up to the boss on the phone, claiming that Kenyo is probably thanking his stars right now for the way the director decided to handle the matter. It turns out that the man sitting under the umbrella on the island is actually Sung-Suk Jin, the director of Dream Max. Director Song is happy to hear that everything went according to plan and that Kang was properly compensated. Then the curious account manager asks the director why he suddenly decided to kindly gift Kenyo a new capsule at his own expense, and before answering the manager's question, he ponders the answer. Then Director Sung explains that even though Kenyo has been hacked, he continues to play, instead of quitting like most people would. He finds it even more intriguing that Kenyo is now playing as a blacksmith, something most players simply avoid. He asks Yang Ho if he feels the same way, and the director can't wait to see what kind of game our hero will play in the upcoming update. Back in the game, we see a build about recruiting SD's groups for Deborah's dungeon hikes, and her group already has a knight, mage, and her as an archer. Seeing Seiya wandering around town not thinking why it's so hard to find a new band. And she's had terrible luck finding one. And when she finally finds a potential member, they quickly back out. Seeing how difficult this whole task is, and she considers just going into the dungeon with a group of only 3 people. Distractedly walking through the busy streets, she accidentally bumps into someone, and we see that it is none other than our sick boy. They both immediately apologize to each other, but after making eye contact they both point at each other. Sia remembers that he was the guy the raging boar was chasing, and she's happy to see him again. But before she can finish her words, Zeke runs away again. He thinks he'd better run away before the situation gets annoying. But unfortunately for him, Sia is extremely fast, so she catches up to him quickly and effortlessly. She keeps up his pace and offers to chat for a bit. But Zeke is horrified when he sees that she is the literal embodiment of the Flash. He ignores her and continues to try his best to get away from her, but it's no use anyway because she even outruns him to get his attention. She insists they chat, and soon Zeke's low stamina shows again. He quickly runs out of steam and chooses the more logical option of just stopping and listening. She shows him the announcement of her group and asks Zeke if he wants to join them. Seiya assumes that he has never been to Deborah's dungeon and tells him about the rumors about the place. Deborah's dungeon is considered a good place for newcomers who want to level up, and it is also a very good place to earn a decent amount of money. And Sia has no idea that Zeke knows about this Deborah's dungeon because back when he was at the top of this game, he was the first to discover this place. After telling him of her desire to go there, she tells him that she has been looking for people to join her, but so far she only has 2 members. She notes that if Zeke joins her group, there will be 4. Which is the recommended group size Arpedia online. Unfortunately, before she could even finish talking, Zeke interrupted her and bluntly stated that he didn't want to join her group, but Sia protests, pointing out that they keep bumping into each other and claiming that it could be a sign. Zeke, however, just shakes his head vigorously, repeating no about 100 times. Sia becomes frustrated and asks him why he dislikes the idea so much, even though he could make money and level up. Zeke is silent for a moment, not knowing what to say to her. And even after some thought, he still couldn't bring himself to give her a definitive answer. Lots of players lined up to meet our hero. Those in line begin to whisper, wondering if Zeke is really as good as they say he is. The man answers them saying that although it takes some time according to rumors, he has a 100% repair rate for all items, and the players were shocked by this news because our hero charges 30 gold for repairs. But of course Zeke starts to get tired from the huge workload, and then he wipes the sweat from his face and admits that he didn't think he'd draw such a large crowd. He wonders if he should even charge more to reduce the number of visitors and make more money. He quickly puts the idea out of his head, reminding himself that he's not doing it for the money. And he still has a hacker to catch. After prioritizing his priorities, he asks the next client to show him the equipment. As he suggests, the equipment provided to him belongs to him as a bars. This ranger's bow is the only D-rank equipment he owned as his previous character. Taking the bow from its new owner, Zeke wonders if he's found the hacker's clue too soon. But then he looks at the solution and notices it's unmarked. Then a rude customer throws him 30 gold pieces as if he were a beggar, and another player asks the guy if he's really going to give the girl a bow. He points out that they have to spend money to get themselves ladies. Zeke overhears their conversation and is upset that they are talking about another player as if he were a Sims character. The brown-haired guy thinks it's risky to give her a rare gemstone and helps her in the dungeons with no guarantee she'll meet them in real life. The gruff guy explains that no one would pricelessly refuse a request after getting it all. In case she does turn them down, the guy says they can always threaten to publish information about her on the community forum. After that they are sure that they can pressure the girl to go out for a drink with them. And the more Zeke listens to these scumbags, the angrier he gets, and he feels sorry for the girl thereafter. He tries to focus on repairing the bow, but ends up overhearing the scum responding to the girl. They are so shallow that they don't even remember her name. That's when Zeke freaks out because he remembers it was Sia. Even when he refused to join her in the group, Zeke hands the guy the bow, says the repairs are done. But when the rude guy tries to take the bow, Zeke refuses to let him go. The guy starts to get upset, reminding Zeke that he's already paid him. But Zeke is just thinking about the poster the archer gave him earlier, remembering that her name was clearly mentioned on it. And while that person is saying something there, Zeke comes to the conclusion that there is no way the username could have been repeated. So he becomes certain that it is the same person. We finally find out this guy's name is Xeres after he falls because Zeke abruptly lets go of his bow. Xeres angrily rises to his feet and curses at Zeke before grabbing him by the shirt. He threatens to pummel him if Zeke doesn't immediately apologize and claims that the blacksmith will be forced to delete the game after he's done with him. Suddenly a huge man appears from the crowd behind and asks Xeres to step aside if he doesn't mind. It seems this big guy can't subject his patience to testing anymore. With a very serious expression on his face, he reminds Xeres and his henchmen that he's holding up the line. This big bearded guy is a famous Arpedia character known as Stormy Guilford. He is the leader of one of the strongest mercenary guilds in the game, Red Tiger Group. All his great feats have made him very popular in the game. And he is also ranked 45th on the server. Right now he's not in war mode or anything like that because he's currently in line with other customers to see Smith when it happens. And so the turn comes. Guilford looks at the damaged sword in his hands and recalls the pleasant memories associated with it. Later, he went around looking for a blacksmith who could repair his sword to its maximum strength. But unfortunately, the blacksmith he went to told him he couldn't make repairs that had a strength of 10. So Guilford went to Zeke. He looked longingly at the sword, hoping Zeke would fix it, but if he couldn't, he'd have to find a man named Jerian. He is distracted from his thoughts when he notices Xeres and his brown-haired friend trying to pick on Zeke. He wonders why they haven't left yet since their repairs are finished. So he decides to confront them. Guilford approaches the guys and tells them to leave if their repairs are finished, pointing out that there are other people in line. Guilford's red eyes glare at Xeres. No wonder he is horrified. When he sees the famous Guilford, he is horrified. Zerusa wonders where Runka came from. He tells Guilford that they're just about to leave. Of course Zeri agrees with him and nervously admits that they've been talking too long anyway. The cowardly duo disappeared in a flash, wishing Guilford a good day. But seeing how they behave toward him, Guilford thinks these guys may have been polite. Zeke didn't say a word during this time, he just calmly looked down holding his hammer in his hand. Then finally he looks up when Guilford picks up the damaged sword, explaining that it's his favorite sword because he's had it since he was new to the game. Zeke examines the sword carefully and Guilford asks if he can fix it. The quick-tempered blacksmith takes the sword and examines it, and Zeke says it's possible, but asks Guilford to wait a bit. Seeing Zeke get to work, Guilford has feelings of renewed hope because his favorite sword has a chance to be fixed. And even though the blacksmith has a rating of D or lower, he thinks his rank is incredible. And while Guilford ponders the subject, Zeke tries his best to stay focused but is distracted by thoughts of CIA and those scumbags. Though he feels like it shouldn't bother him, images of Sia and the guys flicker through his mind, preventing him from concentrating while he's hitting the hammer. Meanwhile, big-bearded Guilford still fantasizes about the sword, and he even plans to hang it on the guild building as soon as Zeke finishes renovations. But unfortunately, the happy moment is marred by a loud crack. He looks at Zeke's workbench and sees that his favorite sword is blown to pieces. But suddenly information pops up that the blacksmith was unable to repair the sword and that it is now in unusable condition. Upon seeing this, Guilford is shocked, horror and rage at the same time. He grabs the hilt of his sword after the blade has been broken and angrily demands a smear on how Zeke managed to destroy him. But before he can get answers, something funny and annoying happens. Sly Zeke almost disappeared because Kanyo quickly left the game appearing tab to inform Guilford. He goes into a rage so intense that in his fury he unknowingly breaks off the rest of the sword. And Guilford angrily asks where the blacksmith has gone and yells at him to come back, cursing him. In the Rocky Mountains, we see Zeri and his fat friend standing in front of a cave. The entrance to the place is fenced off with chains, and the three members of the group stand there in fear of the place that was first discovered by Bars, and it is none other than Deborah's dungeon. Sia had never been here before, so she was a bit mesmerized by the sight. In fear, she didn't move from her seat. Two scumbags start bragging about how they've cleared the level several times, and they say that this dungeon is the lair of a terrifying witch named Deborah. This witch endangered the entire kingdom of Barca 30 years ago. However, Sia is scared after the story they told her. Zeri just pats her on the shoulder and then suggests that they go to the dungeon immediately. Before they can get on their way, someone yells at them to wait. They turn around and are surprised to see that it's Zeke, the goddamn blacksmith. He's breathing heavily as if he's run several kilometers and is glad to see he's not late. Zeke chuckles nervously, asking if he's in Deborah's dungeon. Sia is very happy to see him and addresses him as Mr. Ungrateful Blacksmith, but she likes to call him the goddamn blacksmith. Zeke is a little offended by this nickname, so he lashes out at her, asking who she calls the damn blacksmith. In response to his tantrum, Sia reminds him that he's the one who ran away without even saying hello when they met. Although she was very upset earlier, Sia admits that she's glad to see him again because it means he's changed his mind and is now willing to clear the dungeon with her. She happily invites him to join the group as Sia's archer and extends her hand. Seeing her outstretched hand, Zeke gets nervous again. He hesitates to shake her hand as if she belongs to a different species and just looks at her wrong. He ends up just rubbing his head nervously instead, and then Zeke presents himself timidly, begging her to take care of him. Hearing this, Sia looks up at him and agrees, asking him to take care of her as well. She then quickly introduces Zeke to two thugs named Aldin and Zeri. She also informs them that the same blacksmith she tried to recruit earlier. The three guys have met each other before, but the archer doesn't know it. She tells Zeke that both of these scumbags are experienced players over level 70. While Sia is talking, Aldin and Zeri begin to recognize the blacksmith. At this point, Zeke already knows they recognize him because Aldi starts whispering in Zeri's ear. They both recognize him as the blacksmith they saw a while ago. When Sia finishes introductions, Zeri points out that since Zeke is a blacksmith, he won't have any fighting skills, so he asks Sia if he can bring someone like him along. When Sia hears this, she stands up for Zeke, claiming that he's very strong and that she's even seen it herself. This is the first time Zeri hears someone say the blacksmith is powerful, so he's pretty skeptical about it. And he points out even if that's the case, a craft class character like Zeke can be a problem in combat. Just then Zeke tells them that he remembers meeting them at the forge, and seeing that they still hold a grudge, the guy promises to apologize to them. He starts invading Ziri's personal space, rubbing his whole body against him like a pet cat. Zeke tries to calm this scumbag down by massaging his shoulders and promises he won't say anything stupid. He also promises they have nothing to worry about if he's around, and even claims he's going to be Ziri's dog. As you'd expect, Ziri's is both sparse and alarmed at how strangely the blacksmith is acting, but eventually allows him to join the team. The badasses are reluctant to accept Zeke on their team and suggests that they start taking action before it's too late. Even though Alden is happy to see the blacksmith on the team, he is still very skeptical. He quietly asks Ziri's if he's sure Zeke should go with them, assuming he might say something unnecessary along the way. Ziri senses his friend's discomfort, but assures him that the blacksmith may join them after all. He believes that if the blacksmith tries to say something stupid, they can just kill him and pretend it was an accident. Ziri's plan is to force the blacksmith to leave. So a little time passes and the squad is sent to the dungeon. Inside they find several skeletons of soldiers and tree monsters. The monsters and skeletons all have shields and swords and are apparently the guards of the dungeon. Either way, the squad immediately goes into battle. Alden uses special magical powers to create a huge explosion he calls spinning fire. He destroys several skeletons and monsters. To destroy the monsters, he uses the spell Vile Lesh. This spell turns his sword into a long blue glowing whip, which he uses to destroy monsters. Sia notices the guys on her team doing all this work, and Zeri notices her surprise and smirks at her. The simpleton thought she must have already fallen in love with him after seeing his looks, but unfortunately for him, she doesn't pay much attention to him. He was stunned and angered when he saw her asking Zeke how he had just performed a particular skill. Turns out Zeke isn't half as bad as they expected. In fact, he handles his sword like a swordsman because he's currently fighting alone. The skills and knowledge he gained as bars Zeke is able to fend off all of the monster's attacks. He knows that the skeleton's weak point is its temple. So that's exactly what he's going for. This time he acts much more accurately and manages to land a crushing blow on the skeleton. The other monsters resent him for beating up one of them. So the bloody blacksmith decides to act a lot smarter. He knows that he has no fighting skills, so Zeke decides that his best chance of defeating the wooden monsters is to use tricks. It's learned that these monsters are called mobs. Zeke knows that if they surround him, the game is over. So he concludes that he needs to get rid of all the mobs in the area as quickly as possible. Zeke suddenly lunges at the wooden soldiers with his sword. He knows from experience that their weak point is the source of energy, which is the heart. He takes his sword and stabs it into the heart of one of the wooden soldiers, and the moment he stabs the heart, the monster explodes. Suddenly a tab appears informing the blacksmith that his stamina is low. He hadn't been fighting for long, but the character was already exhausted and in need of food. Zeke was saddened by this, but luckily he had a backup plan for such cases. Before heading out to meet them, he had brought some cookies with him, and he thanked fate for thinking of that, while Zeke was relieved that he had brought snacks, all the more preoccupied with the fanaticism of how hard it was to kill monsters. And Zeke managed to do it even with no skill. And she reminds Ziri's that the blacksmith is very strong. Ziri's is upset that Zeke somehow stole his show. He wonders why Zeke dared to act so cocky in battle. Ziri's begins to reconsider his earlier decision to be magnanimous, and that's why he let Zeke accompany him. But now that he sees a threat to his ego, he changes his mind, while the blacksmith just stands there unsuspecting. Ziri's begins to make his plans to destroy him immediately. After a while, another skeleton of a soldier appears. He is aiming a bow at them, and a purple flame burns on the arrow. The skeleton soldiers shoot an arrow at them, and Zeri seems to immediately realize what it is. He informs the others that the skeleton soldiers have arrived. And just before the purple flaming arrow can hit them, Ziri's uses his sword. He deflects it with a powerful counter-strike skill. However, instead of sending the arrow back to the soldier, it bounces off the sword and hits our blacksmith's chest. It turns out that Ziri's cunning plan is already in motion, and when he sees the arrow hit Zeke, he grins, thinking that the new hidden skill he's learned is pretty cool. He thinks Zeke is even more so because the power of the explosion has doubled. Sia is immediately alarmed when she sees that Zeke is very badly hurt. She rushes to his aid, asking if he's okay. Suddenly a tab appears informing the blacksmith that he will be paralyzed for the next 10 minutes and his movement will be restricted. Even though Zeke is in a lot of pain, he wants to look strong in front of the girl. So he says he's fine, Zeres just scoffs when he looks at him, and he told him that he looks exhausted and assumed that Zeke had already reached his limit because he's a craft class character. Then the two bastards suggest that the blacksmith stay there and rest until the paralysis wears off. They claim they can't carry him, so it's better if Zeke stays here. However, Sia is against this idea. She snaps at the two and tells them that they won't leave him here. Zeres tries to prove his point, but is interrupted by Zeke, who suddenly agrees to stay. Zeke tells them he can get back on his feet if he gets some rest, and he promises to catch up with them, and the badasses agree with him. Zeres claims that the blacksmith is right, and they remind Sia that they still know each other's location since they are in the same group. And he assures her that she has nothing to worry about. Sia thinks about it for a while and finally agrees to leave Zeke. Before she leaves, however, she makes Zeke promise to send her a message as soon as he is free of the paralysis. After Zeke gives her word that she will, she finally leaves with the others heading deeper into the dungeon. And once they're out of sight, Zeke opens his inventory. Zeke heads straight to the potion section, and without wasting any time he grabs a green potion and swallows it. And friend, as he drank the potion, another tab appears that says he just drank the regular antidote, so he is no longer in a paralyzed state. Zeke has a devilish grin on his face as he wipes the potion from his mouth. His plan has worked, and now he can't wait to get on with the next plan. Elsewhere, Sia and the others have gone much farther into the cave. Alden holds a torch to point the way because it is now very dark. On the way, Zeres suddenly starts asking Sia how she likes the bow. He asks her if it's light, and Alden intervenes, assuming it goes with her current outfit. Sia scrutinizes the bow and asks if it's really an inexpensive weapon like they said, because the bow looks very expensive. But Alden says it is a common weapon at her level. Hearing this, Sia thanks them and decides that instead of taking the item permanently, she's just borrowing it until they finish searching the dungeon. Alden mentally chuckles when he sees how happy she is that she has the bow. And then the fat man tells Zeres that it is long past time for them to make their true intentions clear to the girl. But before he can finish his sentence, a stone appears out of nowhere and knocks the staff out of his hands. Everything goes dark and Zeres asks him what's going on. The fat man says that a stone suddenly knocked the staff out of his hand, so Zeres realizes this and asks him to turn the light back on. After much searching in the darkness, Alden finally finds the staff, but when he turns on the light again, he is spent by what he sees. Right in front of them is another army of skeleton soldiers, and they look much more threatening. Alden and Zeres realize that they are surrounded by a crowd. On top of that, there is another problem. It's the fact that Sia is no longer with them. By the time they realize she's gone, they're surrounded by a host of monsters. While someone helps the archer get out of this position, and skeleton soldiers and wooden monsters attack them so fast that even Zeres doesn't know what to do. Zeke just orders Alden to attack, hoping they can somehow survive. Meanwhile, Sia finally tries to confront the mysterious man in driving her away. She stops running and demands to know who the man is. She is still screaming for the man to let her go, but he suddenly brings the torch closer to his face so she can get a better look at him. Sia immediately stops complaining when she sees it's none other than Zeke. It's good to see him. He tells her to calm down, but she can't get rid of her curiosity because she's shocked to see him. She asks where they're going and reminds him that they have to go back to save the others. She's afraid the monsters will kill them both. But Zeke cheekily tells her not to worry, reminding her that Zeres and Alden are both level 70 players who can take care of themselves. He then suggests they continue on their way and go deeper into the cave. And by the same token, Zeke was right in his assumption that the two scumbags actually managed to defeat the monsters. Alden sits on the floor and asks Zeres if the ambush is over. Zeres, who is just as exhausted as he was, saying that they had already destroyed all the monsters. Zeres is extremely upset and perplexed that the mindless one was trying to collect monsters. He pauses when he sees something catch his eye. It was a set of semi-rare objects just lying in front of them. He shows them to Alden and it looks like they are very interesting to him too. The two friends walk closer and Alden wonders if such rare items always just end up in the dungeon. However, Zeres doesn't seem to think their source is important. He was just telling Alden to hurry up and grab them. As they pick up the items, they are both mesmerized by the treasure they just got. And Zeri also wonders how much the items will be worth. But before the two men can get their hands on the treasure, someone stops them. The man's hands are covered in scars, and from his clenched fists you can tell that a fight is about to break out. And some lady says she can't believe they're ready to take it all. Zeres tries to intimidate her for speaking rudely to him, calling him and his friend some low-life assholes. It is at this point that the girl reveals that she and the other players behind her are the actual owners of these items. And unfortunately for the scumbags, she came prepared to face these fools and even chose her main character Wang Chu of level 100. But why did she bring her strongest character to face them? Zeres and Aldin are scumbags, and they are also notorious on the server message board for harassing female players. These losers even threaten female players to meet them in real life. And no one ever knows what will happen after they meet them in real life. However, due to female users leaving the game after these encounters, it doesn't seem good, and the reason it never got out of hand is that the people they were harassing just left the game and then disappeared. As such, no one complained about them, so Zeke made a decision and decided that he would be the one to kick these two scumbags out of the game for good. Back in the game, we see Zeke's memories. First of all, he stole these things from the real owner. Since he knew the features of Deborah's dungeon and it was very easy for him to do so, he disguised himself, took the items and left them lying around for Zeres and Aldin to find. In front of him he grouped the mobs to attack. Eventually, the scum defeated the mobs and found the items, then were blamed for what the smith did. Zeke made Wan Chu come back more prepared because she wanted to deal with the man who stole her stuff. And unfortunately for Zeres and Aldin, now they're taking the fall. Zeke's genius plan is what he calls backstabbing in dungeons. Apparently this was a pretty popular thing in the past that players hated a lot, so Wang and her team members don't plan to show leniency to the two guys who supposedly returned the ban stunt. Wang and the others surround the scumbags, and although they try to prove their innocence, there is no evidence to back it up. As Zeke predicted, by the time Van and his teammates finish beating up the scumbags, they are both forced out of the game. After this whole saga, Sia checks the party board and is surprised to find that the scumbags are out. She wonders if they are dead, but Zeke tells her that's not true. He says he got a message from them saying they had an emergency, and Sia wonders why they haven't sent her a message either. Zeke just says he doesn't know, assuming she can ask them when they log back in, but Zeke says this because they'll never go into the game with the same characters again, seeing there are no more players above level 45. Sia suggests that they go back since Sia is at level 42 and Zeke is only at level 38. And he agrees with her that the task would be very difficult for them. On the way back, Zeke thinks about how he successfully drove the scum out of the game and decides it's time to get back to blacksmithing. Sia suddenly starts saying that she's sorry she couldn't clear the dungeon, and it turns out that for some reason, she can't play the game anymore. Zeke hears this and was immediately thrown, but so he asks her to wait and suggests they go back to the dungeon. Even though he doesn't feel like finishing this assignment, he wants to help the silly girl. So he tells her since they are already here they should just go into the dungeon to defeat the boss. Hearing him suggest such a thing, Sia is very embarrassed and she is practically at a loss for words when he says they should go and defeat the boss on their own. Noticing the disbelief and confusion on her face, Zeke admits that he knows how hard it is for her. But suddenly he starts to shut up. He recalls his childhood when his mom broke his video game because he played all day long. And after a while, she forbade him to use the computer. Thoughts that the girl might be in a similar situation because she hinted that she couldn't play anymore. Zeke starts to feel emotional. He feels like he has to give CIA an unforgettable memory. He's hoping she'll agree to fight the boss. Zeke is acting so strange it's a little overwhelming to Sia. But eventually she figures out that he just really wants to hunt the boss. She asks him if this is really what he means. The blacksmith says yes, wiping tears from his face. Opening his eyes, he is pleased to notice that Sia is already heading towards the dungeon. She's calling him to hurry up. But Zeke just doesn't understand how she got there so fast. Zeke is already starting to realize that the doors have started to close. He desperately runs as fast as he can before he is left in that dungeon. But luckily Zeke makes it in time and he lets out a heavy sigh of relief since he managed to run in just in that moment. Sia suddenly asks him a very important question, whether the two of them are enough to hunt the boss and defeat him. Zeke explains that it would be pretty plausible if the boss was on the level of a stone golem. Zeke is able to brag a little, saying that no matter what happens, they won't have any problems since he's around. Zeke admits that he knows Deborah's dungeon like the back of his hand and assures her that they'll be fine. In the time he had been a bar, Zeke had actually cleared the dungeon over 100 times by himself. In fact, his muscle memory prevented him from making mistakes even if he wanted to do it on purpose. He is sure that he can help Sia. Zeke also comes to the conclusion that it's not such a bad idea to live, since he can also level up in the process. As Sia begins to feel uncomfortable, she notes that it has been quite some time since they entered the dungeon. And yet they still haven't seen the boss. Zeke assures her that the boss will probably show up soon. While saying this, while sitting on the floor, Zeke's attention is drawn to a loud squeak. And it turns out Zeke accidentally sat on a hamster, and when the hamster keeps squeaking they both realize what just happened. Zeke picks up the hamster and Sia is immediately enchanted by its attractiveness, but Zeke is familiar with this hamster. After all, this hamster is always around the stone-naked man. Zeke starts pinching the little hamster's cheek and realizes that the stone golem must also be nearby. So Zeke orders the little creature to move on and call his big brother. Suddenly, something unexpected happens at that moment, and the earth suddenly begins to shake. Zeke concludes that the golem is on its way. All the rocks in the cave start moving, and he orders the archer to dodge to the sides. Zeke is very angry because of the fact that of all the places the golem could have appeared, this is where they are standing. Suddenly at that moment, all the stones began to gather in the sky, forming the golem's body. And when its massive paws touched the ground, the wind blew with such force that many heavy debris fell to the floor. A glance at this creature reveals a giant golem of 6/10 level, created in the Deborah dungeon, and this creature is the guardian guarding the dungeon. Sia is very impressed with the golem and asks the blacksmith with a look of horror on her face whether they can really defeat such a large monster on their own. Of course, with a confident smile, Zeke simply assures her that they can do it, but only if they follow his strategy. Suddenly Zeke starts attacking the giant golem with his sword before Sia can realize what's going on. And when she realizes his plan and tells him she'll cover for him, pulls out her bow and shoots him in the arm. The massive beast remains completely unfazed despite losing 40 life points as a result. The fierce giant golem growls and lunges at Sia, and before she can fire another arrow, he easily tosses her aside and sends her flying. Zeke immediately strikes back when he sees this. He taunts the monster and draws its attention by calling it a dumb-headed dummy. Upon hearing these words, Golem turns into a Zig figurative figure, and Zeke challenges him, claiming that he is his opponent. Zeke decides to have the stone golem fight him when he chops him in the leg with his sword. Zeke's punch takes 15 life points off. Our hero notices that the blow has injured his arm, and he is confused because he was the one who attacked. Then why did Zeke get hurt, and almost starts crying about it, but he is interrupted by an enraged golem who turns on him again. The golem tries to knock him down, but Zeke dodges the attack by jumping into the air, even though he managed to avoid being hit. Zeke is sure that his jumping ability is very slow. He's disappointed that his stats are much lower than he expected. But even so, he knows now is not the time to give up. In his experience, he needs to get on the golem's head to win, but before he can carry out any of his plans, the massive arm of the stone golem rushes forward to crush him. It happens so fast that Zeke doesn't know exactly what to do. At the very last moment, he notices the arrow still sticking out of the golem's hand, and an idea occurs to him. The smirk on his face indicates that he finally has a clear plan. Zeke squeezes the most out of his body and continues to dodge all of the golem's attacks. Sia chases the monster and calls Zeke for help, but he just tells her to stay out of his way. Zeke then proceeds to dodge all of the monster's blows and orders Sai to shoot at the golem's joints from afar. The archer realizes the task and immediately fires another arrow. It hits the golem and deprives it of another 40 points of total health. And then she releases another arrow that strips him of 30 health points, and this time the blast even knocks the tiny hamster off the golem's body. At this moment, Sia went into beast mode because she instantly performs another throw that takes away another 16 points from the monster. By the time she finishes firing, we see that she leaves arrows in almost all of the stone golem's joints. Meanwhile, Zeke sips another potion on the side. When Zeke finishes, he wipes his mouth and tells them that he has found a way to defeat the golem. But suddenly there is a powerful explosion in the dungeon. And the force of the explosion was so great that the potion bottle flies towards the golem. It bounces off the stone monster's body, and Zeke uses the momentum of the blast to fly over the massive creature. While in the air, he flips upside down and takes a powerful leap, aiming his sword at the creature's head. Zeke knows that the golem's weak point is its core. And as he expected, the D-Marks company made sure that the golem's giant core would be in its head. With that in mind, Zeke releases his sword at the golem's head, giving it no chance to react. Zeke uses all the inertia he can muster and generates enough force to pierce the monster's head. The cracks in his head begin to glow a bright red color. Zeke smiles knowing that he has successfully hit his weak spot. Sensing that he has won, Zeke says it's time to head to the awards room. Unfortunately, something unexpected happens. A giant golem suddenly throws our hero off his head. The golem begins to roar in a loud voice as the red color on its head gets brighter and brighter. Zeke falls and is shocked by what happened and even loses his sword in the process. But luckily, before he can fall to his death, Sia catches him like Superman. With concern in her eyes, she hugs him and asks if he's okay. But Zeke is still shaken by what just happened. He doesn't realize he's being carried in her arms like a baby. Zeke looks into Sia's eyes and says he's okay thanks to her help. Zeke releases himself from her embrace to catch his breath. Sia's fright tells him to hide somewhere and come to his senses while she faces the monster herself. Zeke is surprised to hear her say this and tells her that they are almost done hunting. But before he can finish his sentence, he is interrupted by the roar of a giant stone golem. He looks even angrier than before. Judging by the terrifying red glow emanating from his body, they both realize there's a serious problem. They wonder what could have happened to the stone monster. But suddenly a notification appears that the boss monster has entered a berserk state. They manage to bring the boss to the point where its core is damaged and is no longer used for control. At this moment, the stone golem berserk is so enraged that molten magma flows out of his head. The golem tries to crush Zeke again, but Zeke keeps dodging. Still, who has cleared the dungeon over 100 times, he definitely looks pretty damn lost. His outwardly calm and confident demeanor had completely disappeared because he seemed to have never faced a golem in such a state. Apparently he was just afraid that he would lose the first time because he didn't take the dungeon seriously. Zeke tries to attack the berserk golem again, but he is quickly swatted away like a fly and is now reaping the bitter fruits of his overconfidence. He just had a feeling since he had experienced the dungeon hundreds of times this would be a cakewalk for him, and when Golem hits the ground, the force carries him away with the girl, but he manages to get up and attack him again. But unfortunately it ends up with the same result. This is the first time Zeke has ever faced such a strange monster attack. Zeke is really having a hard time. When the golem berserk throws him back again, Zeke remembers that this wouldn't have been a problem when he was a bars. Falling to the ground again, it dawns on him, and then golem breaks his sword. Zeke finds it hard to change with the fact that he is no longer as skilled as he used to be. Especially in such a decisive battle, he falls to his knees and stares at his broken sword, while golem berserk stands behind him preparing to finish him off. But suddenly there is a massive explosion. Someone has dropped a powerful charge on the golem's head. Followed by a massive explosion, Zeke's eyes fly out of orbit with shock as he hears a loud explosion go off behind him. He seems to wake up from his daze when Sia pulls him by the arms and pulls him away from the golem. Zeke follows her, but remains stunned by what just happened. The archer tells him to find shelter and regain his health. Sia urges the blacksmith to run faster, and he manages to hide behind a huge rock before Golem finds out which way they went. The berserk golem scans the neighborhood with its terrifying red eyes and patrols the dungeon in search of our duo. The golem is frantically searching for them. At that moment Zeke's breath catches, and the archer tells them that she checked for exits and found none. And as they expected, to get out of the dungeon alive, they will have to defeat the boss. Sia is still talking when the blacksmith literally passes out like he's falling asleep. Sia demands his attention, but he just says that they can't defeat the golem. Sia was shocked to hear him sound like a depressed monkey whose baboon had just stolen a banana. Zeke says it's the first time he's ever met a golem like that. These are apparently patterns that occur under specific conditions. Zeke says they need to either overwhelm the golem with damage or determine an attack strategy. As a result, Zeke suggests that the best option would be to simply die to cause the least amount of pain. Sia hears these words from him and is deeply saddened and dumbfounded by his words. However, Zeke is left just lying on the floor like a defeated soldier, saying that there's nothing else they can do. And their level is too low, and he feels that they can't find a strategy to fight the new attack pattern. Despite the fact that Zeke has already surrendered, Sia refuses to act as shameless as she has. She gets to her feet and insists that the best thing they can do is try to figure out a new attack pattern. The girl says they should just accept the challenge even if they can't win. Zeke tries to protest, reminding her that their level is too low to risk. But Sia just cuts him off. The girl instead takes her bow and runs out of their hiding place, and before she leaves she reminds Zeke that she is on level 42, and Zeke is at 38th, and through simple math combining their levels, they reach level 80 than enough to defeat the boss. Zeke thinks this logic is very flawed. He argues that it makes no sense because the game works differently. However, she interrupts him again, explaining that if she doesn't work together, they're bound to work things out one way or another. While Zeke hides behind the rock, Sia starts chatting again. She yells at him to hurry up and join her, claiming that the girl will be waiting for his reinforcements. Suddenly, Zeke has a flashback from his childhood. We see Kangyo's younger brother enter his room. Kangyo lies on the floor curled up under a blanket. And Hena breaks the silence by telling him about his sudden decision to drop out of college. Asking Kangyo how he thinks the rest of the family will react to this, but our guy doesn't say a word. All this time, the younger brother finally says that their mother is crying and is worried about Kangyo's future. But Kangyo refuses to say anything. Eventually Hyun moves closer to his brother and reminds him of the time when they were younger. Back then, Kangyo avoided all the kids who bullied his little brother. He was worse than a bully, so they couldn't do anything back to him. And then we see our hero's face and discover that he's covered in bruises. Hyung notices that his never-trustworthy brother is no longer what he used to be. Now he's just a skinny loser with a bruised back. Hyung's words begin to reach his ears when Hyung slaps him, telling him the truth that he's no longer good at school and that the only thing he's good at is playing games. Eventually Kangyo reaches his limit and lashes out at his younger brother, asking him what the fuck he's trying to tell him. In response, Hyun tells his brother to pay attention to the people around him. That statement hit him hard because he knows exactly what he means, his little brother. Hyung admits that he doesn't know what's going on with Kangyo, but asks him why Kangyo didn't think to tell him or any of his friends. In the middle of his words, Hyun corrects himself, pointing out that Kangyo doesn't have any friends. Kangyo tries to say something to his little brother again, but before he can say anything, Hyun leaves the room on his own. As he leaves, he says that there are many things he can't do on his own. He eventually leaves the room and leaves the door open, and outside the room, Hyun tells him Kangyo to go down and eat the wound kimchi their mom made. And asks Kangyo to hurry up because he'll be waiting for him. Shia said the same words in the game and it seems to trigger Kangyo's memories. Back in the game, we see a powerful gust of wind that hits the berserk golem. This beautiful blow takes 97 health points from the monster, and the archer exclaims with delight when she sees it. The joy was certainly not long-lasting, as she immediately receives a notification that her mana supply is running low and that she needs to rest. Besides, his stamina isn't great either, so she now needs to eat if she's going to keep fighting. Despite her fatigue, she smiles, realizing that she has done her best. Even though she is surprised that she has already reached her limit, Sia accepts her fate when a crazed golem tries to trample her into the ground. But luckily before she can squeeze herself into the ground, Zeke suddenly appears and pushes her out of the way to save her. The golem slams her to the ground instead, and is confused when he sees that the archer isn't there. Meanwhile, on the other side of the dungeon, Zeke thanks Sia for giving him some time. Zeke rises to his feet, showing that he has fully regained his health and stamina. And then the blacksmith admits that Sia was right in her earlier words. Now he thinks they should fight to the end even if they die. When he says this, one of the items from his inventory materializes in his hands. It was the kind of pick that had that fierce boar in it. Zeke declares that the battle will be all or nothing. When Golem Berserk tries to attack him, he attacks him back with his pickaxe. And thanks to his renewed motivation and replenished stamina, our hero hits Golem hard in the arm and deals huge damage to Golem. As a result of this attack, part of the Golem's arm explodes. Zeke can't believe it worked and is pleased to discover that the Karka is the Golem's Berserk weak point. But Zeke has a hard time believing this is true, because according to the system the pickaxe has no attack power. To be sure, he decides to try once more to hit the Golem's broken arm with this weapon. But unfortunately Zeke keeps missing due to his low combat abilities, and it's getting really hard to figure out. Zeke keeps trying to learn how the pickaxe works. And that's when he notices Sia calling out to him with a warning for Zeke to look up. And as he looks up, the hero sees the Golem's other fists flying in his direction. And Zeke sits there helplessly, knowing that he probably can't dodge that blow. But just before his seemingly inevitable demise, Zeke suddenly sees blue lines on his fist as it rushes toward him. This brings back another memory. He recalls when Pabuchi told him how ores are made from a combination of several different types of materials. Even though they become unified, the pressure between the different materials leaves some gaps. Pabuchi then said that at the time Zeke may not have been able to determine this at his level. But he assured that if he could pinpoint the problems, he could create something incredible. The key word Zeke had retrieved from his memory was mining. With this in mind, Zeke raises his pickaxe to strike the golem with the pickaxe, and this causes a powerful surge of energy to pass through the golem's body. As a result, his entire arm explodes, and Zeke suddenly smirks at Golem, claiming he's finally found his weak spot. Judging by the look of horror on the golem's face, it's safe to say that our hero was right. No matter what, the giant stone monster is not giving up without a fight, so it tries to attack the blacksmith one last time, but unfortunately for the monster, the blacksmith now has a cheat code. Zeke speaks the magic words again and hits the golem several times with his pickaxe on all of its limbs, until they all explode one by one and the monster is practically crippled. The golem's arms and legs are blown to pieces, and her ruined head is left untouched, and then a notice appears informing Zeke that he has succeeded in mining. After seeing the brilliant and magnificent demonstration of our hero defeating the giant berserk golem, the archer girl Sia was incredibly stunned. Her eyes flew out of orbit as she looked at him, and despite being a character with crafting skills, that doesn't count the fact that he hadn't even reached the recommended level for this assignment. Zeke is clearly tired, but he manages to stay on his feet to finish the task. And with a victorious grin on his face, he then points his pickaxe at the golem, who sits there like the big lump of rock that he is, and at this point already knows that the game is over, so our hero continues to finish the job by delivering his most powerful blow. Then a tab appears confirming that Zeke and Sia have defeated the giant berserk stone golem. After the golem berserk exploded, Zeke picked up one of the shards and examined the stone, he realizing that his special ability to see lines could also be used for mining. Zeke thinks about the fact that the lines were not visible before, but they became more obvious when he focused on them. On their quest, no matter how it all goes down, Zeke is very pleased that he successfully hunted down the stone golem of Deborah's dungeon. He is proud of his accomplishment even though he has never seen such an attack pattern before. Zeke is about to start praising himself when Sia interrupts with her own praise. She calls him incredible and is extremely surprised that he defeated the boss, even as a craft class character. She almost jumps on him with excitement, and his legs impress her so much that she can't even hold back. She puts her hands on his shoulders, impatiently asking how he did it, and she claims she wants to know more so she can be like him. But Zeke nonchalantly sidesteps her, telling her it's a trade secret. Zeke says he can't just reveal it to her, and while they're still standing there, their characters begin to be transported out of the dungeon. In a matter of seconds, Zeke and Sia disappear from the place. After disappearing, they end up in some kind of factory or something. The game system throws them to the ground and they both writhing in pain. Seeing this place for the first time, Sia feels uncomfortable, so she asks Zeke where they are. It seems the blacksmith hasn't been here either. But based on his experience, he assumes this must be the reward room. Rubbing his head, he looks around and begins to question his original suggestion. At this point, he is just as confused as Sia, and begins to wonder what this place is. Looking at some items around and other scientific items, Sia suggests that they may be in some sort of lab where mobs are created. Zeke is pretty sure that the reward room in Deborah's dungeon is nothing like this place, and he should know that since he's been through the level over 100 times. However, he begins to suspect that maybe it's just Deborah's rumored hidden room. While Sia looks around the lab, Zeke thinks deeply about why the game brought them here. He wonders if this is where the players who defeat the giant berserk stone golem, rather than the normal boss, end up. Zeke's musings are suddenly interrupted when Saya announces that she has found the chest. Hearing this, Zeke is immediately excited because he already has a feeling he knows what it means. With a crazed expression in his eyes, he is very excited to see that they might end up in the reward room after all. When Sia opens the chest, the first thing he finds is a pair of goggles that she didn't expect to see at all. But these goggles are actually a rare item called an eagle eye. This item increases shooting accuracy by 20% and range by 30%. Zeke hears this and loses all self-control when he sees that a pair of goggles is a rare item. He desperately asks her to show him, but she just pushes him away, saying it's hers. The blacksmith just sighs and goes back to looking for another reward. Zeke expects that there are 2 reward chests in the game, and soon he finds a second reward chest. And when Zeke finds it, he's so excited he lifts it up in the air and yells that he found it. But unfortunately, the great joy is short-lived, because when Zeke opens the chest, he finds an ordinary artifact and, as you might expect, the hero is both shocked and disappointed to see it. Zeke holds the artifact in his hands and looks at it with great sadness, then suddenly a tab appears informing him that the artifact is called the Witch's Gloves. It gives an extra 3 points to his defense power and does the same to his magic power. And so he puts on the gloves. The next thing he finds is a piece of paper containing the first half of the Guardian's blueprint. And by completing this blueprint, the blacksmith can learn how to make black iron. The black iron is a kind of Guardian robot that Deborah tried to create in the past. After reading the article and realizing what it is, our guy is really excited. He is intrigued by the prospect of building a robot from the blueprint in his head. Zeke thinks about how crazy the whole thing is and wonders if he can start building the robot immediately. However, before he can do so, he must fulfill the necessary requirements. Zeke then returns to check the chest and discovers that the last thing inside is a book. He wonders if it's a book about skills, but quickly realizes that it's Carwin's Hero's Manual. It contains a note left by Karen. If he reads this book, he will gain the skill Understanding Structure and Destruction Weapons. Then another tab appears revealing the prerequisites for learning the structure skill. These include the worst affinity for blacksmithing, the completed quest of Raquel's dungeon, a crafting skill of rank 6 or higher. As for the conditions for the weapon resolution skill, one needs a mining skill, defeating the fierce giant stone golem, as well as an understanding of a rank 7 structure. After reading this, Zeke realizes that he already has the right to use the structure skill, so he decides to use it right now. However, he still doesn't know what exactly he will use the skill for, so he goes back to reading. Zeke sees that Carwin wrote that he doesn't know anything else. However, he did reveal that defeating the witch golem was no easy task. And as for the giant stone golem, it was even harder. In Carvin's guide it says that he heard an important suggestion from one blacksmith. The blacksmith told him that all ores are made of several different materials combining and that there are still some gaps between the different materials. And those words opened the way for Carwin to destroy the golem. And after that, he was able to develop his ability to see the particles of all materials and refine it even further. And then this skill he called Understanding Structure. As Carwin practiced the structure skill, it became easy for him to mine ores and break equipment. This eventually led him to create a skill he called Weapon Destruction. Hick reads it all with great attention and interest, frosty at the idea that he can destroy weapons finding this incredible skill. Zeke continues to read the manual and we see that Carwin's battle with the witch is not over. Deborah will return with a powerful army, and that is the reason why Carwin did not destroy the witch's cave, but chose to leave it as it was. Carwin hoped that those who came after him would train against the scum of the witch to learn how to fight the army she would return with. After Zeke finished reading, he thought about what Carmen had said about Deborah returning from the army. He was also intrigued by the fact that only a blacksmith could learn the skills of Carwin's character. Sia notices he's in his own thoughts and goes to check on him. She asks him if he likes the reward. He assures her that he likes it. His feelings for the reward go beyond mere fondness. So with her help, Zeke was able to learn a hidden skill. Hearing this, the girl suggests that it's time for them to leave. Zeke is speechless when he turns around and sees the mess she made while she was looking for other awards. And when the guys get out of the dungeon, Sia admits that it's been forever since she's seen the sky, and no doubt our hero agrees. Zeke notes that the dungeon quest took a whole day, while in the real world it took 8 hours. Sia is a little shocked to hear this and thinks she should quit the game and go back to her real life. But before she leaves, Zeke tries to pluck up the courage to ask about something completely personal. But she beats him to it when she suddenly asks how old he is in real life. This question catches him off guard, but he manages to tell her he's 20 years old without stuttering. When Sia hears this, she extends her hand to shake his, saying that they are the same age. She smiles at him and suggests that they be friends from now on. Zeke was stunned by this news, and Sia asks him if he's going to shake her hand. He suddenly comes to his senses and shakes her hand a little stammeringly. Sia then tells him that she has added him on Messenger and suggests that we meet next time. Suddenly she tells him that she will contact him as soon as his exams are over. Zeke is shocked to hear this. Sia sees the look on his face and explains that her midterm exams are fast approaching and that's the reason she wanted to clear the dungeon quickly. Upon hearing this, Zeke feels incredibly stupid for developing this to a point. the reason turns out to be nothing more than a school exam. Realizing this is quite annoying, and Zeke has a hard time hiding the fact that he's upset. Sia sees this and teases him for being upset. She then playfully punches him in the face with her fist. But it leaves a visible mark. Then it turns out she's just cracking his skull. Sia tells him to keep his head up, telling him that he has a face like they won't be able to see each other again. Sia is still trying to cheer him up when Zeke suddenly dies. Turns out that her in-game punch was so strong that it killed Zeke, sending him back to the real world. Suddenly a tab appears informing her that she has killed Zeke and will now be labeled as a murderer. And of course our Archer is horrified by what she's done. While she's freaking out about it, our boyfriend asks her to pack up the stuff he left behind, but she keeps panicking because her username is now colored red, which makes it obvious that she's the killer. She's afraid it won't go away and continues to freak out while Zeke tries to get her to pack his things. Zeke tries to calm her down, but she ignores him and he just gets frustrated. We see a delivery truck pull up to Zeke's house. This was the compensation that the Dry Marks company decided to send him. Upon receiving the new capsule, Zeke unpacks it and instantly activates it. And when he is about to be transported to our online Arpedia, we learn that a week has passed since the hunt for the stone golem in Deborah's dungeon. Since then, he has improved his structure understanding skill, as well as his crafting and repair skills. Using understanding, he achieved a century's worth of success, and the quality of the gear was quite impressive. As a result, within a week he became the most famous master blacksmith in Boldeni. The moment he enters the game, he immediately notices how much more realistic the experience is compared to when he was using the old capsule model. And before he can fully realize what's happening, he's surrounded by a sea of people begging him to fix his stuff. Zeke explains that he can't because he has an assignment, but the players are upset to hear this, and each of them even starts demanding that he dotes on them alone and ignores the others. Suddenly a man standing in the midst of this turmoil declares that the king of Slysia has appeared on the plains. This attracts crowds, and they are shocked to learn that such a rare slime has appeared, and without wasting a second every single one of them jump out of their going in pursuit of the rare slime. However, the mysterious man who started the rumor is left behind, and Zeke suddenly remembers that the Slime King does not manifest on the plains. The mysterious blonde-haired man expresses his relief that they can now talk in peace with Zeke and informs him that he has come to discuss something with him. We see Kangyo at the Civil Servants Academy. During class, another student notices something unusual about Kangyo. For some strange reason, he writes insanely fast and the guy has a hard time realizing it. Another student observes him and comes to the conclusion that Kangyo is an unusual guy. See, it's been a month since Bars was hacked, and since then our hero has gained notoriety as he planned, but still no clues as to who the hacker might have been. Since most of the Bars gear was high-level gear, Kangyo felt it was necessary to raise Zeke's level as soon as possible. He was looking for ways to do this quickly, and in the process he found himself on a quest to explore the trade route, in addition to leveling up quickly. Kangyo believes that the trade route will be applied if he succeeds in completing the task, and if that happens there will be significant changes in the Arpedia, to the point that a major update may eventually be needed. Kangyo is determined, present at the release of this update, and decides that he can't miss such an exciting quest. The King of Barkers recently announced this quest, and it involves sending a delegation to establish a trade route with the old Narzark dwarfs. Since the one who gives the task is the king, according to rumors many predict that the reward and experience will be incredible. Turns out Narzark is a land of dwarfs that is known for its excellent blacksmithing. This further encourages Kangyo to go on a quest there as a blacksmith, because he sees it as a great opportunity he shouldn't miss. The only problem is that from the system's point of view, his reputation level is too low. Zeke is afraid that if he applies for it at this point he will surely fail. Kangyo gets desperate and takes out his anger by pulling his hair. A classmate sees this and becomes even more convinced that Kangyo is an unusual guy. We go back to the game and we see a blonde guy talking to Zeke. He introduces himself as Dylan, head of the Leiden branch of the Gold Rush Trade Guild. He said that he had come to recruit our hero, as he had made a name for himself as the king of repair in Baldeni. He even promised to compensate Zeke for his services and politely asked him to come with him as well. Zai thought for a while, muttering to himself and thinking that he should at least try to ask for something in return. Dylan responds by asking him if he can hear him, but the blacksmith pretends not to. Seeing this, Dylan gets upset because he knows our guy is faking it. But Zeke isn't interested, so he tells him to leave, and hearing Zeke's speculation Dylan laughs, realizing that the blacksmith doesn't know much about the gold rush. Our guy tries to prove he knows about it, and the annoying talking up his nose states that Gold Rush is in second place among the trade guilds, and even though Dylan is very offended by this, he hides his anger behind a laugh, and responds that even second place is pretty good. Dylan admits that they haven't been in second place for a long time. But he says that will change very soon, and they will be in first place very soon. Then he asks Zeke if he's ready to join them and become one of the best in the Arpedium, but before he can finish his sentence, Zeke bluntly states that he doesn't want to join them. Dylan doesn't hear him and just keeps talking until he suddenly realizes that our guy is blatantly rejecting his offer. Dylan is shocked and upset because Zeke points out that he doesn't want to join any guilds because he knows they will treat blacksmiths badly. Zeke says that he won't be included in group hikes, and further states that he will be compelled to do back-breaking housework while the goods they produce will be intercepted at a very low price. After expressing his point of view, Zeke asks Dylan if their guild will be any different from other guilds. Dylan laughs nervously and admits that such guilds exist. He asks him what he thinks about becoming a partner. Zeke's surprised to get the offer, and Dylan admits that they usually only offer this opportunity to high-level users. He explains that there's nothing special about becoming a guild member, and tells him that he can sign up on the guild's homepage. After all this, all he has to do is keep in touch from time to time with Dylan, who will act as his manager. Unlike official guild members, a blacksmith will have no obligations. Dylan explains that Zeke can simply start his relationship with the guild in this way and officially join if he likes his benefits in the future. After Dylan finishes preaching and making his suggestions, Smith thinks long and hard about his decision, but in the end Zeke agrees and deliberately wipes snot on the man's shoulder to seal the deal. But unfortunately for Dylan, Zeke agrees to more than just the terms of the Gold Rush Guild's offer. He says he has his own terms to accept before he can join them for real. And then we see inside the carriage a conversation between Dylan and the other members of the guild. As it turns out, they all seem to think they are paying too much attention to the blacksmith, especially when they're even sure he'll do as well as he claims. However, Dylan explains that he does not work based on his intuition, but rather on his experience. Another participant is confused by his statement, so he explains that he saw someone with a low level who had amazing repair and manufacturing abilities in the past, and he says the player's name is Brian. Another member immediately realizes that he is talking about the best player on the server. Dylan says he knows that and adds that Brian is the greatest master, some of whose items sell for millions. Upon hearing this, the chat participant decides to go along with Dylan's plan, and then points out that he noticed Dylan returning most of the gold that was supposed to be given to the blacksmith as a bonus for signing the contract. And the chat participant wonders why Dylan took 90% of the gold he was supposed to give to Zeke, and then we find out that Zeke chose a spot on the list for the first expedition instead of gold. Here with many other players, Smith approaches the board where the list is pasted, eagerly waiting to see if his name is there. Seeing his name, Zeke experiences the joy of realizing he has been chosen. And despite the fact that he has had little time, he can't deny the fact that the large-scale guild is impressive, not to mention the fact that he was given 10,000 gold as a signing bonus. Regardless, Zeke thinks about the huge rewards he received just for joining the Gold Rush Guild. Zeke begins to fear that Dylan might want to start making strange requests of him when they start working together. And the thought makes him uncomfortable, but he gets over it. Instead of asserting himself with such theories, he decides that he should just go and prepare for the quest. And now we come to Bald's bakery called Joe's, which is located in the East Plaza. And now we meet our gig Chad. We learn that he is the leader of the Red Tiger Group, one of the strongest mercenary groups in the Arpedia. And we also know that he is ranked 45th in the user rating in the game, and right now, he's standing in line at the bakery, waiting his turn like a good Samaritan. And despite being at the top of his game, Guilford is not arrogant or cocky at all. In fact, we need more people like him in the world. He's just a simple guy who knows when to be polite and when to fight like a true warrior. And now it's finally Guilford's turn. But when he gets to the counter, all the cookies he wanted to buy were already sold out. Our guy Guilford is just shocked because this has never happened to him before. That's when the woman behind the counter explains that another guest bought everything. And Guilford is furious when he sees the guest leave the bakery with a big stack of cookies he was supposed to buy. The mercenary confronts him and grabs him by the shirt, indicating that he shouldn't be so greedy when his inventory is already full. Of course, when the cookie thief turns around, he sees that it's none other than our Kenyu's face. he's already munching on cookies, and unfortunately for him, we're not the only ones who recognize him because Guilford from the Storm also remembers that he was the blacksmith who destroyed his beloved sword and escaped. Zeke gets confused and makes a face like he's in shock. But he asks Guilford who the hell he is, which makes Guilford's nerves snap like a rope, whereupon Giga goes into a rage, saying that he destroyed his precious sword. Guilford attacks Zeke trying to land a punch, but our hero shortens up from the blow. Then Guilford just disappears because he's out of the game. Zeke was puzzled, and Guilford's entire team was shocked that their commander was missing. Next, someone reprimands Guilford for talking instead of doing. They say he helps with the dishes, and while his wife goes to get groceries, he just keeps playing. Giga says he understands everything, but why was it necessary to pull the cord, which makes Guilford's wife furious. There are questionable noises coming from the room, the fact that elbows shouldn't be bent out like that, but you shouldn't break your legs either. Thank goodness I'm lucky enough to have a wife and I don't get beat up like that, at least not as badly, Guilford said. But there's some girl in the other room, and it looks like Guilford's daughter. And she's telling the parents to be quiet because she's studying. And as we can see, it's the same seer. Suddenly we see the gates of Barca Castle, where all the groups are gathered for the expedition. There are so many, it's impossible to count them. People are noticing that a group of red tigers are also participating in this expedition, saying that the rumors were true. And for them, this quest will be a simple one. Guilford tells everyone to look for him carefully, meaning the blacksmith, because knowing that the blacksmith bought so many provisions could mean that he is also on this quest. We see Zeke, as well as a gypsy vendor who says she sells necessities. She asks our hero for some attention, asking if there have been times when he has been attacked by monsters on the road. Zeke tries to say something, but Gypsy interrupts him and says that of course they have. And she thinks that people with a trade class should have a guarantee of survival. Zeke says yes of course, but he thinks to himself that he better get away from that peddler, and fast. But the gypsy merchant abruptly offers him this ring for 10,000 gold, which has a teleportation function. HTK comes in shock at such a cheap price, thinking maybe to buy, but still it is a large amount. Holding the bag of gold in his hands, Zeke somehow handed her the bag of money. Definitely a gypsy, he thought. Zeke walks away with the ring thinking he'll sell it for more. And the peddler thanks him for buying it, but suddenly he notices that this ring only teleports 20 meters forward after 4 seconds. After that, it collapses altogether. At this point, the trader is happy that sales were excellent and that Balden is full of simpletons who don't know anything about it. Then Zeke comes up to her and tells her that she's Mashenka and to give him his money back. Gypsy plays dumb and doesn't know what that beggar Zeke is talking about. Zeke at the time says don't play dumb because she sold him a piece of crap that only teleports 20 meters ahead. But the gypsy stands her ground because she sold the teleportation ring. So what could be the problem, says the gypsy, but Zeke doesn't like this arrangement, calling her a fraud. But this gypsy says she's not a con artist, because she has a glamorous name, Lizzie. And Zeke says the name Lizzie is just right for a con artist. Then a soldier comes up and asks what's up, because they're moving out soon, so be ready. Zeke tells the soldier that the girl is a fraud, but the gypsy quickly hides behind the soldier's back and says she will tell him everything, which leaves Zeke puzzled. The gypsy says she's just doing honest business, giving the soldier a little gold for his paw, and the soldier such a thought and said plainly, and then put a gun to Zeke's face saying that he was a miserable criminal who had slandered an innocent lady. But Zeke arises because that gypsy girl started it. But the soldier tells him to keep quiet, telling Zeke to apologize to the madam. And as punishment, Zeke must pull the cart for her, or he'll have him expelled from the expedition, at which Zeke goes into shock and that gypsy woman smiles evilly. It was Lizzie, a level 55 merchant, so we're all on the road, and we see that Zeke is clearly having a hard time carrying it all. Suddenly, a man in a black robe is standing next to a tree, holding an eagle on his arm. He puts a note on the paw of a big eagle to take it to someone, and we see an eagle in a place called the treasury of the kingdom of Bordin. The eagle flies up to the window and some man says it's already started. The kingdom of Barkas has already sent an exploitation team. Then this man says that the kingdom of Barkas has friendly relations with them so openly they can't be stopped. And this grandfather asks some man if he's picking up his train of thought. The man says he understood and it was Kira ranked 89th in the assassin class. Once again we see an exhausted Zeke lying on the floor who doesn't understand how it got to this point, and Gypsy Lizzie tells Rob number 1 to pitch a tent and not to loiter. And then she says she needs to get out of the game. So let Zeke put up politics and cook a meal, but Zeke's had enough and he asks, "Really?" Saying that she was overdoing it, like "You're going to make me a slave," Zeke asked. Then Zeke, like a real man, starts yelling what he can't yell anymore. But this gypsy woman starts yelling "guard." And our man quickly gets to work, thinking it's the perfect ground for a tent. Gypsy says that's the way to start. And before she leaves, she tells Zeke to get everything ready. Zeke starts to cry, because if it wasn't for the quest, this wouldn't have happened. Then, while eating doshirak, Zeke wonders why he's doing all this, because he caught the con artist. Someone responds saying he's good at fixing things, so this man with an axe asks him for repairs. Zeke wonders if these guys happen to be red tigers. And this man with the scar says, "He heard you're the king of mending, but you don't look like it." Thinks he's gonna play with him first, then bring him to the commander. ZTK gets up and thinks okay, even though he hasn't even eaten properly, but then uses his structure skill. The man was shocked that his weapon had been repaired and was 90 out of 90 strong. Zeke lies on the hammock and the guys are still amazed at his durability, saying the rumors weren't lying, but they heard he destroyed the commander's sword. And Zeke's asking these old guys to go away because he's trying to read here, but Shramik doesn't like that he called them old men, and then starts saying that Zeke is shameless, the way he acted when he broke the commander's gun. And they're the same age, says Scarface. Zeke doesn't understand what the old man is saying. Scarface says he's not an old man, calling Zeke a puppy. Then he tells Zeke to follow him before he kicks his ass. Zeke puts the book down and says he remembers you about the old man he saw at the bakery. And Zeke asks if you're acting like this because Zeke took your cookies. Scar was clearly furious at such words, for a mere cookie would not provoke them. The comrades think that's what happened. Then Zeke points his sword at them and says he doesn't care because he wanted to blow off steam anyway. So let them attack. Zeke ends up tied up with Guilford standing in front of him. And Zeke resents them for mobbing him. Guilford sits down with Zeke and tells the snot-nosed blacksmith if Zeke apologizes right now, he'll forgive him. Zeke doesn't understand and says he stood in line and bought all the cookies with his own money. So what other apology can there be? So just back off, but Guilford says he's not about the cookies. But then what's the point? Zeke asks, saying he hasn't hurt anyone in this game, at least on this character Zeke thinks. Guilford seems to be pissed off, and it doesn't look like it's going to work, so he asks the guys to release him and Zeke is surprised. Then he sees Guilford attack him from above to Zeke's uncomprehending face. Guilford unleashes his crushing force on Zeke, causing a huge explosion. Zeke notices that Guilford only has a 1-power stick, and Guilford says since Zeke doesn't understand, he'll have to teach him some manners. And he starts with a lesson in discipline, hitting the Zeke with his stick, but not level 99. There is again a very powerful explosion, but Zeke doesn't understand him, he just thinks the man is taking his anger out on him, but then there's a sharp blow to Zeke's head that knocks him to the ground. Guilford looks at Zeke lying there and says he didn't try to hit him hard. But I guess it was enough. It was a lesson learned, but the difference in levels is too great, so Guilford says that if Zeke can touch him, he'll let him go. Zeke on the ground says Guilford's a stubborn old man. He puts conditions on him and thinks he'll never be beaten by a low-level blacksmith, Zeke says. He doesn't understand why everybody looks down on him. Zeke jumps out of his seat and attacks Guilford. But he blocks his attack with his stick, but Zeke strikes again, and Guilford still fends off Zeke's attacks. So our hero steps aside and Guilford thinks Zeke's fighting skills are pretty good for a rookie. However, such does not trump the difference in levels. ZTK attacks Guilford again with all his fury and his sword touches Guilford's stick. And then he just rips that stick apart, not level 99. This was our hero's skill, namely the weapon destruction skill, and this skill only worked because the comprehension of the structure had increased to rank 7. Guilford doesn't realize how Zeke broke his gun. Zeke thinks to himself that he doesn't care if he's a rancher or not. This is probably the first time Guilford has seen such a skill. Then he throws his weapon away in an attempt to headbutt Guilford. But Guilford was too far away and so Zeke and Guilford kiss. Which Guilford's comrades were shocked by. Some were puking, some were laughing, and some were eating popcorn. And even the squirrel dropped his acorn at the sight of it. Well, of course Guilford wasn't happy about it, so he's going to kill the damn blacksmith. For Zeke, it was the first kiss he'd ever given Guilford. Zeke was even a little embarrassed by it. Guilford tries to hold him back since he promised to keep his promise if Zeke touches him. But Guilford tells them to shut up and let him go. Then Scarface approaches Zeke and offers him an elixir of health, saying the blacksmith was badly shaken. He didn't think anyone would overpower the commander and break his weapon. And then asks what skill was that? Zeke says he can't give any details. Then Scarface asks if you're in a guild. He'd like Zeke to join their guild. And the commander would like Zeke, but Zeke, wiping the elixir from his mouth, says you just beat me up 5 minutes ago, asking if you're ashamed. And the Scar says, yes, we didn't act very maturely, but you broke the commander's sword and escaped. So we'd better forget about this incident. But Zeke says he doesn't realize he broke someone's sword, and then he remembers that he broke something recently. So with a smile on his face he says yes, let's forget it. But Guilford still tries to kill the blacksmith, calling him a jackal and a bastard. Zeke asks him to forgive him for the incident, and Guilford says that's not the point, because he's talking about the kiss. The next day people are eating lunch and the food tastes like crap. And the Blondo asks why it's so badly cooked, and the other one tells the Blondo to turn down the sense of taste in the settings, since we need to regain stamina and there's nothing else. Suddenly a gypsy woman appears and asks, "Are you out of supplies? Would you like something like this?" Everyone is shocked because it was a golden apple, and the gypsy says she will drop the price from 10,000 to 100 gold pieces for the sake of these guys. And everyone like morons immediately buys these apples. And the gypsy woman was happy again, because she had success today too. And Zeke, dyeing those apples, asks if you really have to go that far to make money, calling this Madam Vicious. And she says that Zeke is too young to understand everything, because the world is not ruled by skills or level, but by money, because you need to increase your wallet and inventory. As she leaves, she tells him to finish the apples and then does what she wants, saying it's time to look for some other products. Zeke doesn't absolutely apperceive why she's so obsessed with money, and questioning the apple he names it Nielsen, and that apple will be his companion Don Sark. But then all of a sudden an arrow flies right at Zeke, and Zeke puts an apple under that arrow, and it turns out it was Kunai who killed Nielsen. Guilford then starts yelling that they are under attack and has ordered everyone to take defense and be on standby. These Kunai hit people and they fall down and die, and then we notice a man in a cloak jumping on these people, but Guilford quickly chops him up, causing him to die and disappear. Guilford looks at the body and thinks it was a death effect, but there was already someone at his back, and that someone had already pointed his sword at Guilford in an effort to kill him. Just as suddenly Zeke appears and uses the weapon destruction skill, breaking the weapon that was aimed at Guilford. Zeke tells the old man that he owes him one, but Guilford says a scratch like that wouldn't do him any good, and then also thinks he wouldn't notice him when that person was behind him and his disguise skill was at a high level. Guilford asks the man who he is, and the man in the robe says, "Who am I?" The man in the robe says he is the best among all assassins, the man who leads the Black Crescent Moon, and the people standing nearby were shocked, because the Black Crescent is a famous assassin guild. This man says they're right, and his name is Kira, who is rank 89. And his class is assassin, and we learn that someone has hired assassins to interfere with trade between the kingdom of Barkas and Narzark. And the task of this expedition is to repel the attack and reach Narzark within the specified time. After a while, people wonder if this Kira is the rancher. They all think the only thing they can get from him is death. But Kira says he didn't come here to kill, he came here to hold them off and get the title. So he asks them all to surrender so he doesn't get his hands dirty, asking them how they like his plan. But one of the group tells Kira to stop making a circus, because he spent a lot of money on this expedition. And who's going to reimburse him for all that money? Kira smirks and says it's the guy on the move who didn't realize anything, as suddenly this medium hits this guy right in the face. What that guy dies of, Kira says it's not a negotiation, it's a mere formality. They're surrounded by hundreds of his followers, so if they don't surrender, they'll be dead. Guilford thinks the man is bluffing, because there are many people in the forest, but not hundreds of them. And if the NPCs die, they'll be in trouble. So using sign language, he orders a mage named Hyunsuk to block the view from the forest with magic while he provokes Kira's attention. On command 3, Hyunsuk is supposed to begin the mission, but we see Zeke say that Kira isn't the best assassin, just a petty thief. So Guilford tells Hyunsuk to back off. Zeke asks Kira what kind of assassin would reveal himself and lecture the victims. After all, he had to kill everyone before they noticed him. Kira notices it's that blacksmith again. Zeke continues his conversation, saying if you're a rancher, fight decently one-on-one, not surround yourself with followers and winning with dirty tricks, coward. Zeke's words seem to annoy Kira, saying the blacksmith was just lucky he broke the weapon. And now he's acting like a tough, stupid nub. So Kira tells her comrades to kill Zeke, and then the shells come at Zeke, but he easily deflects them, saying that an attack at this level is child's play, but abruptly he notices that dozens of kunai and all sorts of weapons are flying in their direction. So Guilford orders Mage Hinsok to use his magic, surrounding himself with some kind of barrier. Kira orders, with a gruff voice, to her comrades to kill everyone and leave no one alive. Guilford laughs at those words, because they are the only ones who will die here. Guilford turns on Berserk mode, and from that energy everything starts to fall apart. Guilford builds up his power and then unleashes it on Kira, but the devil dodges and marvels at that frenzied power. But still Guilford lacked some speed, and then a tab appears saying that Guilford's stats were too low, so the Berserk mode was cancelled, gaining the Hydra blood effect instead. And now his health points have been reduced by 50%. At this point, Zeke thinks he's a genius, because he figured out how to use the inventory and get the armor log out of there. It's armor that blocks all attacks, but you can't move with it on. Zeke thinks the red tigers are all over it, and now it's probably time to get out. But Zeke catches a glimpse of a picture where everything has already been lost, and then Zeke also gets the Hydra blood effect, lowering his stats by 50%. Zeke remembers that Hydra blood is an item that falls out of the Hydra of the dungeon boss Kadri, a powerful poison that instantly lowers health and stats, and it looked like that food was poisoned, although Zeke thought it tasted good. And thinking about it, a devil is already flying from behind and wants to attack Zeke. But at that moment, Guilford rushes in and deflects Kira's attack. But on the other side another devil attacks Guilford, which he also dodges. Kira thinks Guilford is just a monster, because even after being poisoned with poison, his attacks don't work on him, and Guilford seems to be quite weakened by now, so they need to get NPS out of here as soon as possible, because he's at a disadvantage. So he decides to run away from the place, and Zeke the blacksmith does the same. But Zeke won't last long, so he has to hide somewhere. For the same thing, Zeke heads straight into the woods. But will Zeke get to the hiding place, or will he use the teleportation ring? A gypsy peddler rolls her cart along a dense forest path. It is obvious from her frightened face that she is running for something, and then we're transported to the moment where the Black Crescent group is already sorting out the belongings of the fallen guys. Kira tells her companions that it's time for them to move out and they'll chase the others when their recon team returns from their mission. Kira notices some noise, and it was the gypsy girl Lysia hiding behind a tree. Kira starts to approach that tree, when suddenly one of his men responds to him, saying that the recon team has returned. And the scouting team says they're headed for Rocking Bear Canyon. Kira talks about the truth, clearly up to no good. And then, with one swipe of her hand, she cuts down the tree, but there was no one behind it. Then he tells his men that they need to get to the canyon first to attack the remaining men. And as it turned out, Lisa crouched down in time so that Kira's attack did not hit her, but then she runs somewhere forward, thinking that if this is the same guild of assassins, and even with a prankster, judging by the number of bodies and things, half of the expedition group died. She needs to warn everyone as soon as possible, because if they get ambushed, the game will be over. But some monster gets in Lisa's way and walks right towards her. Both Lisa and the monster both start screaming. The ogre runs after Lizzie, and she wonders where the yellow ogre came from. Lise falls and rolls forward on Mother's Land, hitting a rock with her cart. Then she gets up and sees that the yellow ogre is already at her back, and it looks like it was the end for her. Now we see a flashback where some person gives Kaisa bonus money for a job. She's worked so hard, so this man tells her to buy something with the money. And it looks like it's our Lizzie. She thinks about being able to start school if she adds to the rest of the money. At the piano school, someone calls Jisoo's phone, and it was her sister who says that Daddy's in trouble. Time flies, and we see Jisoo's cell phone is empty of 2.5 million won. That money went to the hospital bills. She is asked to apologize for the incident, but Kaisa smilingly says that money comes and goes, so it's okay. But sitting at her desk, Kaisu is clearly upset because the school she wanted to attend is no longer in her plans. Back in the game, we see Lizzie holding the stone in her hand cooking no, saying to this ogre, "Do you have any idea how much went into this quest? She worked so hard to earn that money." Lizzie screams that she's not giving up anymore. She starts ogre stones, but the ogre doesn't sneeze at that at all. But Lizzie goes on and on about stoning the ogre, telling him to just die, and then the cries for help are heard. Our favorite blacksmith comes to the rescue and takes out the ogre from behind like a rat. After which the ogre flies right at Lizzie. And then vaporizes. Lizzie looks at it all, falls to her knees, and doesn't realize what just happened. And Zeke lands behind her, asks if the ogre is dead, saying it finally worked out, and then interrupts and sees Lizzie lying on the floor. And Lizzie has nothing to say because she thought she'd be dead, but Zeke asks Lizzie what she's doing here. So 30 minutes before Lizzie's accident, we see two people looking for Zeke. They're wondering where he's gone. Then they hear some noise and it was Zeke using the log armor, saying he barely got away, and now the antidote must be found, but his song did not play for long, for behind him stood a yellow ogre who gawked at Zeke as if he were his wife. It was a yellow ogre that was a rare mob that appeared near the Nemesis Mountains. And since the ogre was strong, battles with it were usually avoided. Looks like Zeke's out of luck, because the ogre starts attacking our guy. But our hero is happy about it, because the antidote to the poison falls from him. Using the information from the forum, our hero uses the Nemesis branch and starts choking the ogre or chopping it with his sword. No matter how strong an ogre's attack is, it's useless if you can't hit it, thus dealing -70 health points to the ogre. Then the rest of the figures come and the ogre remembers that he's screwed, so he decides to run away from Zeke, but Zeke isn't happy about it, telling the ogre to stay put. So while drinking that antidote potion, Lizzie doesn't believe Zeke killed that yellow ogre. And Zeke says yes, he killed the ogre, and now he has the title of patron saint of ogres. Lizzie still can't figure out how he killed an ogre with a blacksmith class. And then Zeke is happy that now he has no effect from the poison. And then Lizzie tells Zeke let's work together, which surprises our hero. Lizzie asks, he wants to do this quest too, and she has a plan to get rid of the Black Crescent Guild. We see the group that managed to escape. Scarface tells Guilford they're in place. Guilford realizes that this isn't over, so he immediately strikes, and as it turns out it was Kira. Kira who used disguises, and Kira was even impressed because he was sure that he had hidden his presence well. But how did Guilford do it, asks Kira. Guilford says let him consider it an adult experience. Kira snaps her fingers and summons her men who surround Guilford's group and begin to attack. But Guilford also deflects their attacks, and then Guilford orders Magoo Hyunsuk to use his magic. But at that moment, Hyunsuk slits his throat, causing Guilford to start screaming, when at the same moment, Kira starts attacking Guilford. He then smirks and puts Guilford to sleep on the ground, starts to say that it seems Stormy Guilford's reputation is exaggerated, he only has one hit left. Suddenly Kira notices some noise like the sound of wheels, and it was Zeke calling Kira a petty thief. Kira thinks it's that guy again, and Zeke tells Kira to catch the gift by letting go of the cart. Kira quickly destroys the cart, then says he heard Zeke escaped. But somehow our hero came to him, and it looks like Zeke wants to die, Kira says. But then he stops talking and smells something strange. But then Zeke throws a Molotov cocktail at Kira, which hits Kira's leg. Then our hero screams now, and everything around him starts to explode, including Kira himself. Then Lizzie shows up to watch all this madness. And just before that, Lizzie shows us that these barrels contain alcohol. She wanted to sell it at the gnome trade. From the smell of it, this liquor is insanely strong. Lisky drips some on the ground, then tells Zeke to watch as she reveals that this liquor is insanely strong. Lizzie throws a match and that blob just explodes, so if we can somehow tip the whole cart of liquor on it and then set it on fire, there will be a big boom, says Lizzie. Lizzie goes on to say that even if he's a tanker, he'll still die from one explosion since he's a killer. But Zeke's not sure about Liz's plan, but Lizzie says her plan sounds good. And Zeke says let's assume everything goes according to plan, but what about the other killers? And Lizzie says they can just blow them up with Kira. But Zeke claims to say that this thief will never hang out with the group, he'll probably come out of hiding to show off. And Lizzie tries to say that if they can kill Kira, everything will be okay. But Zeke interrupts her and says there's still too many of them even without Kira. And then Lizzie is outraged because Zeke didn't come up with any good ideas. But Zeke thinks they must have been studying somewhere before they attacked our group. It's easy, because first they'll go to where the killers are hiding, back to the moment of the explosion where Lizzie runs away from it all, thinking that it all happened just as Zeke planned. Shortly before, Zeke said he would show a place where the canyon could collapse, and after signaling for the barrels to be blown up. Lizzie can't believe it, but Zeke was really thinking about blowing up the canyon, and besides, he killed the yellow ogre. Who the hell is the blacksmith? Lizzie thinks to herself. Zeke watches the whole explosion scene, saying he was a little dubious about the plan, but it worked out just right, and the more he learns about the skill of understanding structure, the more he likes it. Zeke decides he needs to learn more about this skill. When he's done with this assignment, but suddenly a burning man walks up to him and asks, "Are you going somewhere?" Zeke turns around and sees a burning Kira who attacks Zeke from behind, but Zeke deftly dodges this attack and panting thinks about how the damn thief is still alive, even after we set him on fire. Zeke remembers that Kira is a tanker, so like the other tankers, they are all just monsters. Meanwhile, Kira, standing in the fire, tells the blacksmith something that will make him regret it. The NPCs and the newcomers are about to walk across the bridge. Guilford thanked whoever had caused the explosions, because that was the only reason he was still alive, and now they had to hurry before the black crescent moon chased them. But just as suddenly, Lizzie calls for Commander Guilford, and she tells Guilford to get them across the bridge immediately before the assassins come after them. Guilford gets shocked and asks, "So you're saying you built the explosions?" Lizzie answered yes. She was also helped by a blacksmith named Zeke. Guilford asks Zeke, "But how?" And Scarface tells the commander that everything is already on the bridge, so they should hurry. Looking off into the distance, Guilford says he's going to wait for the blacksmith here. But his subordinates don't understand why, because sooner or later the killers will be here, so it's better to just leave. Guilford says that this blacksmith saved him twice, so he's not going to be in his debt, and Guilford says he can't leave without the blacksmith. In another scene, we see Zeke and Kira fighting each other, and Zeke uses weapon destruction. Morning starts talking, "So this is the skill you used before, and you think you can counter them with these cheap tricks?" Zeke points his sword at Kira and says, "This one tells me the man can't even stand up straight because of the fire damage." Zeke is trying to say they're all barkers, as suddenly Zeke takes damage all over his body, and he can't understand where this sudden damage came from. Kira walks over to Zeke, and looking at him says that this skill is called residual image attack. And Kira was annoyed since he thought Zeke wanted to keep dodging his attacks, calling him a goon. And now Kira says she's gonna kill Zeke, like bugs do, by crushing him with her foot. Well, suddenly Zeke starts screaming for him to do it now. Kira turns around and wonders if there's any bombs left. And then they turn back and see Zeke's already out like a rocket on his feet, and Kira goes back and calls Zeke a bastard. But Zeke laughs at Kira, gives him the finger, calling him a dumbass for falling for it. And so while in the Cave of Triumph in the mountains, the nemesis Kira goes inside and tells him to wait for him until he finishes him off, saying he'd like to defeat Zeke in real life. Suddenly something is thrown at him. But Kira reacts quickly and attacks with his dagger, but then notices that it was just a cookie. Zeke wastes no time running brokenly to the side, attacking him, and then just chopping him apart. Zeke finally rejoices that he's finally killed Kira. But as it turns out, it was all an illusion and it was Kira's hidden skill. It's called Shadow Bait. It summons a clone that moves just like the main body and disappears when it's attacked. So without expecting anything, Kira slaps him on the back, sends him kissing the ground, and then tells him that Zeke's a pretty tough guy, and maybe he's more of a pain in the ass than Guilford, but now it's over. Well, all of a sudden the vines wraps around Kira's leg and Zeke starts laughing and then starts saying, "See, there are no mobs or objects in this cave, but there is a really interesting plant growing here. Don't even try to resist, you won't be able to escape its grip," and it was a level 33 cave vine that wraps around any object nearby. Zeke gets to his feet and says hard that it was risky, but it worked, and you should have watched your step before you stepped on anything. Kira is pissed because Zeke will use some tricks until the very end, and then Kira yells, "How can you do anything in such a short time when you have no skills or weapons?" Zeke, holding some object in his hand, says he doesn't need combat skills or weapons because he killed a giant stone golem with this pickaxe. But Kira starts laughing, saying, "So your secret weapon is a simple pickaxe?" Kira yells, "Well, look at it, whether it's a simple pickaxe or not." Kira closes her eyes, expecting to get hit with a pickaxe, but we see that Zeke miscalculated his strength and missed, and Kira mocks Zeke by calling him a fool for not even being able to hit a stationary target. But as it turns out, Zeke's target was not Kira, his target was this wall. And this place was the core of the cave walls, and Zeke had just destroyed that core, so this cave would soon collapse. But Kira doesn't believe Zeke's words, as if some pickaxe could make the cave collapse. But seeing the cave actually collapse, Kira panics in disbelief. They say he's never heard of a skill like Zeke's, so Kira concludes that it must be a skill that's messing with his mind. After all, this Zeke is just a blacksmith. So he must be bluffing. The fact that if the caves really collapse, it will fall not only on me, but also on him. So Kira is trying to run away before the caves collapse, but the vines do not allow him to do so, grab his legs, and Kira falls to the ground with his face. And the system says the vines won't let him move freely for 10 seconds. But Kira can't believe it, because he's a rancher and he's going to be defeated by a fucking blacksmith. Well, the rocks coming right at him say you're gonna die right here. And now the mission for such a scout group was failed, because including him all the assassins were also killed, and now the guild Black Crescent faces a serious fine. At the bridge, one of Guilford's men says it's safe to say Zeke is dead. Guilford says Zeke is not a quitter, and Scarface agrees. Zeke appears on the horizon saying he is alive and in one piece. Scarface was surprised that Zig was safe and sound. And Zeke says if it wasn't for that ring, he'd be dead for sure. After all, thanks to the ring, he was able to teleport in time to avoid the destruction of the cave. But, frankly, Zeke thinks it's a rip-off for that shit, considering the price of the ring, but he thanks our gypsy. Lizzie thought that ring was really crappy. Well, the blacksmith found a use for it, so Lisa decided to make Zeke her slave because he's not like a normal guy. She tells Zeke to thank her like a big sister, because she's the reason he has the ring. But Zeke says he doesn't even know how old she is. And Guilford praises him for defeating little Kira. Zeke says Guilford's right. Unlike the old geezer, he's done something. But for some reason, Guilford gets mad at that and says that Zeke needs more trouble. Everyone starts laughing and the atmosphere finally becomes calm and friendly. Zeke says it's time to move on, straight to Nassau. Suddenly we are transported to a fortress in the snowy mountains. Where there's a lot of snow, the group is welcomed that the trade group from the kingdom of Barsas has arrived. So open the gates are opening. The system congratulates on the accomplishment of the mission expedition to the nose. Out of 80 adventurers only 28 people survived, just like the 28 Panfilovs, and now these men are getting a gift from the king himself. Well, Zeke got 3,000 experience and 700 prestige, thus raising his level to level 55 and his crafting and repair rank to C rank. Also, the king of the bark himself gave Zeke the Videka shield, which can only be used by a blacksmith with special abilities. It can block any attack for 1 time per day. And next, the conference is talking about a character named Zeke. It's been a month since he created the character and became a blacksmith. The blacksmith is said to be run by the same man who ran the character Rankai the leopard. And after creating Zeke, he began to show signs of unusual behavior. He defeated the giant berserk stone golem that was activated by a hidden event. He is currently in the nozzle where the next trigger is set. They as developers believe that this user has a good chance to activate a new event in Mycenae. And then someone starts saying yeah, let's assume that level 55 can do it, but why would that be a reason for them to postpone the update since this event in Kenya could lead to significant changes in the entire online Arpedia? And if it doesn't coincide with an update deadline, users may find themselves confused. The same Lippy says to department head Kim. Do you think this even makes sense right now, since it took the giant golem 3 whole fucking years to turn on berserk mode? And so what you are saying is that the low-level smith looks like it can activate events. So we need to postpone the update. Will you take responsibility for what's going on and the fact that we postponed the update? Mr. Kim asked the lipstick. Mr. Kim bows his head and says just looking at it from a long-term user perspective. But suddenly someone interrupts him. He gets up from his seat and says he'll take responsibility, and it was Director Suk Jim, the same one who was sitting on the beach. He apologizes for being late because he was busy preparing for this meeting. Lipsy tells Suk Jin to sit down. He also asks what he meant by he'll take responsibility. And Suk Jin says it's simple, since he already said to postpone the update, he'll take responsibility. But Lipsy asks why is that so? Suk Jin fixes his glasses and says that this is only a small part of it. He'd just like to add a few more things to the update. Pressing the button, Suk Jin says to wait until they add a few more things, showing them new classes, new quests, extensions of Deborah the Witch's story, and there was a bunch of stuff including 300 hidden skills, and then asking the bosses what they thought. Gooberstick seems to like it so much, he agrees to postpone the update. And then Suk Jin says if we can't achieve the expected performance, he'll take over. Kim says to Suk Jin, so this means we won't take the initial update into account, because it will take at least 2 years to master this entire world. and Sukjin says he did most of the work while on vacation. And the development team just needs to put the finishing touches on it. Mr. Kim makes a face and wonders. So he did it alone? And then Sukjin says he's been waiting for this moment, watching the online Arpedia change as it moves forward. Next we see Kangyo, who is delusional, saying that he caught the bastard hacker, saying that he found out that the hacker was hiding, and all this nonsense is seen by Kangyo's younger brother. Looking at him with a kind of bad look, after looking at Kangyo for a while, he leaves his room while Kangyo continues to sleep. While in the kitchen, his mother asks Hyun where Kangyo is. Hyung says he must have been playing the game all night so he's still asleep. His mother is furious that he's still asleep. He told her that he would study. But all he does is play games all the time. But Kangyo's father says what's wrong with that, because considering his past, his father thinks that Kangyo is going out of his way to prove to his parents that he will do everything on his own, and that's a good thing. And the mother tells the father it's because you're the one who's doing this to him. That's why he's like this, and what's his condition to make a living? And the father says what's the problem, he can inherit our store. Telling his wife that he wants their son to be happy. After all, when their son was having a hard time, they couldn't do anything about it. That's why if he has something he wants to do they should leave him alone. And Kangyo standing around the corner hears his mom saying that she's worried about his health. Hyung starts clapping at his father for saying such touching words and says that since it's a big deal, he'll skip his school today in honor of that. Mother says never, which upsets our little brother. We see Kangyo sitting on a bench late at night. He starts thinking about the words his father said, thinking that mom and dad have their own worries, but he doesn't care at all. In the past, we see Kangyo is not happy with his food. After all, there was a dead rat in his food, and yes he did ask the canteen for more meat, but isn't this all too much for Kangyo to say? He pulls out his phone and thinks he needs to complain. He posts that he found the body of a rat in his food. It was in the school cafeteria, and he attaches a photo to make it believable. Next, we see some blonde guy bursting into the classroom, while yelling about that bastard Kangyo being in this class. Guys start whispering about this guy. That this guy was from a Japanese high school, and this guy was Kemple John. He was famous since middle school for being crazy as hell. And if you look him in the eye, he's gonna attack you. Peng Joon walks up to Kangyo who is asleep at his desk. He pokes Kangyo to make him wake up. Kangyo thinks it's the teacher and says he was awake and imagined it. Suddenly, the bully punches Kangyo in the face, causing his nose to bleed and he falls to the floor, and the bully says that Kangyo is going to die. Kangyo comes home and mom is clearly concerned about Kangyo. She asks Kangyo, did you get in a fight? But our guy says he just fell down the stairs. But my mom's more worried, asking if you got into a fight with someone. Maybe we should go to the hospital. Kangyo turns to his mother and says, there's nothing to worry about, he's fine. His school life turned out to be hell, with Kemple Joon constantly coming after Kangyo and picking on him. And as Kangyo's friends grew distant from him, he became more and more isolated. Day after day, time after time, they all bullied Kangyo. And then he kind of asked, why are you doing this to me? But Pelzone doesn't like Kangyo's tone, so he asks what you're doing to yourself. The hero clenches his teeth and then shouts at the whole room why you're doing this to me. There's silence, and then they start laughing again, like, look at our victim. God, we're so scared, they said, and then someone from behind the door tells these assholes you can't be like this. If they ask you a question, you have to answer correctly. And it was a student council president named John Heen. Looking at this guy, he thinks he's the guy who's ranked first among all of them. Gil comes over to Kangyo, sits down and says you asked why they did this to you, but then listen carefully. Hyunil grabs Kangyo by the hair and says, I don't need a reason to make fun of you. I just don't like you, that's all. And everyone starts laughing. Back to the present, Kangyo will punish that bastard Kemple Jew. And then boxing, he says, just get me, you fucking kids, with the fighting chip he learned in the game. He'll turn you all into mincemeat. Then a handkerchief flew into Kangyo's face. And now he can't see anything in front of him. And then he gets hit by some blonde guy and falls to the ground, and the blonde guy says, if you bumped into someone, maybe you should start apologizing. Kangyo says yes, I apologize. And then I notice that it's the same Kemple Jew. Kemple Jew starts to get angry asking why he was silent. He's not going to apologize by kicking Kenyo's leg. And our heroes are clearly very scared now, so now he grabs Kenyo by the scruff of the neck and asks him if he can't hear him. Kenyo doesn't understand why Kimple-ju is here. And the asshole is about to hit Kenyo. But he gets a text message on his phone and the blonde guy lets Kenyo go, saying he's lucky. As he leaves, he tells Kenyo to be careful next time. And Kenyo sweats, thinking it's all over. Then in another scene, we see the Night City and the soju is revealed. And someone says that Narzark and the Kingdom of Barkas have begun trading. That must be why the Lord's finances are in dire straits. He starts to say that the staff said that the tribute from the southern Bahrain was too small. And Pelgent says it would be nice to double the tribute. The dude we've already figured out is the same John Hennell who asked Jun about his answer, who says he's got it all figured out. The next day, we see Kenyo standing in front of the training center. He thought he was fine now, and he's not afraid of other people anymore, and he's not afraid to leave the house. And remembering that last night, he says he will become much stronger. He will raise his physical body level to improve his mentality too. When Kenyo opens the door, he yells that he's glad to meet you and he came here to learn martial arts. Then he sees a picture of everyone throwing things at each other, breaking things, killing things, and so on. In the martial arts section, Kenyo looks at this guy and thinks he's dead. And then he starts to leave saying sorry. But since he's working, he doesn't have a chance to train. But he gets noticed by one of the people at the center, and then asks if you're a new member of this club. Kenyo nervously says no, not at all. I made a mistake and accidentally walked in. And as Kenyo is about to leave, he bumps into the person behind him, looks up and is confused. The man looks at the guy carefully, and then realizes it's the blacksmith, and as we may have already realized, it was our Guilford.